There is something happening inside your mind right now that you probably don't even realize. Something so powerful that it has shaped every decision you've ever made, every success, every failure, every dream that never came true. Your thoughts. But what if I told you that your thoughts are not really yours? That the very thing controlling your life might be nothing more than a series of illusions? Buddhist wisdom has known for over 2,000 years what modern science is only now beginning to understand. Your mind is not what you think it is, and in the next few moments, you're going to discover why. Have you ever wondered why some people remain calm, unshaken, and deeply at peace no matter what happens, while others are constantly anxious, stressed, and struggling with the same problems over and over? The answer is not luck, not intelligence, not even effort. It all comes down to how they use their thoughts. Because here's the truth, your thoughts are shaping your destiny right now. They are pulling you toward happiness or suffering, freedom or struggle, wisdom or illusion, whether you realize it or not. And the scariest part? Most people never even question the nature of their own mind. But you're different. You're here because you feel that something deeper is at play, that there's a hidden truth behind your mental patterns, your emotions, and your life experiences. And you're absolutely right. Buddhism doesn't just teach you how to think differently. It reveals the secret of how thoughts actually work. Why some thoughts seem to repeat endlessly in your head, trapping you in old habits. Why negative thinking has nothing to do with you, and how to break free from it forever. Why controlling your thoughts is actually the wrong approach, and what to do instead. This isn't about positive thinking. This isn't about blindly forcing yourself to believe better things. This is about rewiring the very foundation of your reality, so that your thoughts no longer control you, but instead become your greatest ally. Because here's the shocking truth. If you can understand the secret power of your thoughts, you can change everything. Your peace, your confidence, your energy, your ability to create the life you actually want. And that's exactly what we're going to uncover. By the time you finish this, you won't just see your thoughts differently, you'll see yourself differently. So, are you ready? Let's begin. There is a silent architect shaping the course of your life, one that works so subtly that most never even notice its presence. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand attention, and yet it is responsible for everything. Your happiness, your suffering, your opportunities, your obstacles. This architect is the power of your thoughts, and whether you are aware of it or not, it has been designing your fate since the moment you were born. In the depths of Buddhist wisdom, this invisible force is not just acknowledged, but deeply studied. Your thoughts are not mere flickers of the mind. They are seeds that will one day sprout into reality. Every moment, you're planting something into the fabric of existence. Whether it's a seed of peace or a thorn of struggle depends on the nature of your thoughts. Nothing is random, and nothing appears out of nowhere. Life is responding to the unseen movements of your mind. Many believe that karma is simply the result of actions, that good deeds bring rewards and bad deeds bring suffering. But Buddhism teaches a more profound truth. It is not just what you do, but what you think that shapes the karmic blueprint of your existence. The mental world is the origin of everything that follows. Your outer world is nothing more than a reflection of the thoughts that have taken root within you. Some thoughts take years to materialize. Others shape your experience instantly. But all of them leave an imprint, creating the reality you live in, whether you realize it or not. The intention behind a thought holds more weight than the action itself. Two people can perform the same action. one out of love, the other out of greed. And though their external behavior looks the same, their karma will be vastly different. This is why thoughts matter more than actions. A single moment of resentment, when fed and repeated, can shape a life of anger. A single moment of compassion, when nurtured, can create an unshakable foundation of peace. The mind's influence is immeasurable, not because it forces events to happen, but because it aligns your energy with the very fabric of existence. Every thought carries energy. Some are light and freeing, lifting the weight from your shoulders, while others are heavy and burdensome, creating unseen resistance in your life. Thoughts of fear, doubt, and hatred create a kind of gravity that pulls suffering into your orbit, while thoughts of clarity, kindness, and wisdom dissolve the barriers between you and a peaceful life. Many spend their lives trapped in an unconscious cycle, unaware that their own thoughts are the invisible thread weaving their future. They blame fate, circumstances, and even other people, never realizing that they are standing in the center of a storm they have unknowingly created. This is where karma moves beyond superstition and into the realm of deep understanding. Karma is not punishment. It is not a cosmic force keeping score. It is simply cause and effect. A thought is a cause, and the conditions of your life are the effects. Nothing happens by accident. When you think with clarity, you act with clarity. When your mind is tangled in conflict, life mirrors that conflict back to you. This is not philosophy. This is reality. And until you take control of the garden of your mind, you will continue to reap the same crops of chaos and confusion. The ripple effect of thought energy is more powerful than most could ever imagine. A single thought does not just remain in your own mind. It extends into the world around you. It influences how you speak, how you carry yourself, how you react to situations. And this energy is not contained. Like a wave expanding outward, it touches everything. A single harsh thought can set off a chain reaction, altering the course of relationships, decisions, and experiences. A single thought of patience in a moment of anger can prevent years of unnecessary suffering. This is why awareness is everything. If you can watch your thoughts, if you can begin to recognize them before they take hold, you gain the ability to reshape your karma in real time. Thoughts will still arise, but you will no longer be a slave to them. You will no longer unconsciously plant seeds of suffering. Instead, you will cultivate a mind that naturally moves toward peace. And when the mind is at peace, life follows. Many wonder why their circumstances never seem to change, why they fall into the same emotional traps, the same struggles, the same disappointments. The truth is that change does not happen in the external world first. It happens in the mind. Life cannot give you something you are not mentally aligned with. If you carry a mindset of scarcity, no amount of wealth will ever bring you security. If you hold on to anger, no amount of external peace will ever satisfy you. This is why transformation cannot be forced from the outside. It has to come from within. When the Buddha spoke of right thought, he was pointing to a mastery that goes beyond temporary motivation. It is not about thinking positive thoughts to cover up negative ones. It is about seeing through the illusion of harmful thinking altogether. It is about understanding that not every thought deserves your belief, that many of the ideas running through your mind were planted there long ago, shaped by society, conditioning, and past experiences. And if you do not awaken to this, you will continue to let these unexamined thoughts run your life. But once you begin to see the nature of thought, something extraordinary happens. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer. And in that realization, A new kind of power is born, the power to choose which thoughts you allow to shape your reality. Thoughts will still arise, but you will not blindly follow them. You will see them for what they are, passing energy, not absolute truth. This is the secret most never discover. It is not about forcing yourself to think differently. It is about seeing through the illusion of thought itself. When you stop attaching to thoughts, when you stop letting them define you, they begin to lose their power. You don't have to fight them. You simply don't have to believe them. And when you master this, life shifts in ways you never expected. Thoughts create karma, not because they are magic, but because they shape your perception, and your perception shapes how you move through the world. If you see obstacles, you will live in struggle. If you see possibilities, you will live in expansion. This is not wishful thinking. This is how the mind actually works. Your thoughts create patterns, those patterns create habits, and those habits create your destiny. Nothing in your life is separate from this law. Every relationship, every opportunity, every challenge, all of it is connected to the invisible landscape of your mind. And the best news, you are not powerless in this. You have the ability at any moment to shift the energy of your thoughts, to plant new seeds, to cultivate a mind that naturally attracts peace instead of conflict, wisdom instead of confusion. This is the ultimate teaching of Buddhism. Change your mind, and your world will follow. But the change does not happen through struggle. It happens through awareness. Watch your thoughts. Question them. Do not accept them blindly. And most importantly, remember that you are not bound by the patterns of your past. The moment you wake up to the truth of thought, your karma begins to shift. This is not a belief. This is not philosophy. This is the reality of cause and effect. And the moment you understand this, life is no longer happening to you. It is happening through you, and you are finally, fully in control. Everything so far has pointed to a truth that is both liberating and unsettling. Your thoughts shape your reality. But there is an even deeper question, one that shakes the very foundation of identity. If thoughts are responsible for the course of your life, then who is responsible for your thoughts? Are they truly yours? Or have you simply accepted them without ever questioning their source? Most people live under the assumption that their thoughts belong to them, that the voice in their head is their own. But Buddhism challenges this belief at its core. The mind is a vast, ever-changing stream of perceptions, ideas, and emotions. But does that mean it belongs to you? Thoughts arise and disappear on their own, appearing without permission and dissolving without effort. If they were truly yours, wouldn't you have control over them? Wouldn't you be able to stop them at will? Yet they continue, uninvited and unstoppable, like waves in an ocean. Buddhism teaches that the self, the very thing that claims ownership of thoughts, is an illusion. This is the principle of anatta, or non-self. The mind is not a fixed entity, and neither are its thoughts. What you call your thoughts are merely impressions left behind by experiences, culture, language, conditioning, and countless interactions with the world. The thought you had 5 minutes ago, the worry about the future, the memory of childhood, they arise not from some fixed you, but from an intricate network of causes and conditions. Thoughts are not self-generated, they are borrowed. Everything you think has roots beyond your conscious awareness. You did not invent the language in which you think. You did not create the emotions that attach themselves to certain memories. You did not choose the fears that grip you in the middle of the night. These things were given to you, passed down by society, by parents, by friends, by experiences layered on top of one another. And yet, Despite all of this, the mind convinces itself that these thoughts belong to it. It identifies with them, holds on to them, and suffers because of them. When you start seeing thoughts for what they truly are, temporary, fleeting, and not inherently yours, something incredible happens. You begin to detach. The voice in your head loses its authority. Instead of being dragged by every thought that arises, you start watching them from a distance. Instead of reacting, you observe. And in that observation, a powerful realization emerges. Thoughts have only as much power as you give them. Most suffering is not caused by external events, but by the thoughts attached to those events. The same situation can cause two people to have completely different experiences, not because of what happened, but because of how their minds process it. One person, upon losing their job, may fall into despair, believing they are worthless. Another may see it as an opportunity for something greater. The difference? One identifies with the thought, the other lets it pass. The event is the same, the suffering is optional. Understanding that thoughts are not personal is the first step toward mental liberation. Buddhism does not teach suppression or forced positivity. It teaches observation. A thought arises, but you are not the thought. A feeling comes, but you are not the feeling. The mind, like the sky, remains unchanged no matter how many clouds pass through it. But when you believe you are the clouds, you suffer every storm. Letting go of thought ownership also transforms relationships. When someone insults you, what causes the pain? Is it the words themselves, or is it the meaning you assign to them? Words are simply sound vibrations, meaningless unless the mind clings to them. A child who does not yet understand language will not be offended by an insult, because their mind does not process it as personal. The words pass through them like wind. But an adult, conditioned by years of attachment to identity, reacts as if those words are a direct attack on their existence. Every conflict, every argument, every misunderstanding is fueled by the assumption that thoughts belong to a fixed self. The ego, which Buddhism reveals to be an illusion, clings to thoughts as proof of identity. I am this kind of person. I believe in this. I stand for that. But these statements are built upon thoughts that have been absorbed from the external world. If they were truly yours, they would never change. And yet, over time, perspectives shift, beliefs evolve, ideas once held as absolute truths fade away. This is proof that thoughts are not personal. They are visitors, not permanent residents. When you see thoughts as visitors, you stop being so affected by them. A negative thought arises. Let it come and let it go. A positive thought arises. Appreciate it, but do not cling to it. The moment you stop attaching, thoughts lose their ability to control you. This is the essence of true freedom. Buddhist psychology explains that much of what you think is simply the echo of past impressions. Samskaras, or mental imprints, store every experience, shaping the thoughts that arise. This means that many of your current thoughts are simply past experiences replaying themselves. If you were once betrayed, the mind may continuously generate thoughts of mistrust. If you were once humiliated, the mind may feed you thoughts of self-doubt. These thoughts are not chosen, they are remnants of past conditioning. But here is the key. Just as old thoughts were planted in the mind, new ones can take their place. The more you see thoughts as temporary visitors rather than personal truths, the more space you create for clarity. A thought may arise saying, "I am not good enough," but instead of believing it, you simply notice it. Where did it come from? Does it serve you? If not, let it pass. Thoughts lose their power when they are not fed. This is where deep meditation becomes a revolutionary practice. In stillness, when there are no distractions, the mind reveals its chaotic nature. Thoughts flood in, one after another, each demanding attention. But the more you sit, the more you realize that you do not have to engage with them. The mind is like a restless child. When you stop reacting to every cry for attention, it eventually settles. In this stillness, the truth of anatta becomes clear. There is no fixed self controlling the mind. The self is not the thinker. It is the space in which thinking happens. Thoughts come and go, but something remains unchanged. That awareness, that presence, is the only thing that is real. Everything else is passing. The greatest illusion the mind ever created was convincing itself that it was in control, that it was the thinker rather than the observer of thought. But once this illusion is seen through, life transforms. Stress lessens, fear weakens, attachment fades. You stop trying to control thoughts, and in doing so, you gain mastery over them. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in the belief that they are their thoughts. They live as if every thought must be acted upon, as if every emotion must be obeyed. But the wise see through this. They watch their thoughts like a river, flowing endlessly but never grasping at any single drop. They do not fight the current, nor do they try to stop it. They simply remain on the shore, aware but unaffected. This is true inner liberation, not changing thoughts, not suppressing them, but recognizing that they were never really yours to begin with. The mind will continue to create thoughts, just as the heart continues to beat. But the moment you stop identifying with them, the moment you see them as passing illusions, you step into a freedom most will never experience. And once you reach this level of detachment, a deeper realization arises. If thoughts are not personal, if they are simply fleeting expressions of past conditioning, then what remains? What is beyond thought? This is the question that leads to the next great truth, one that takes you beyond the mind itself. The moment you stop identifying with thoughts, you begin to awaken to something much greater, the vast stillness that has been there all along. Beneath the surface of conscious thought lies an invisible force shaping every aspect of your life. It is silent, hidden, and yet it dictates how you react, what you believe, and the way you perceive reality itself. This force is the subconscious mind, the unseen architect of every thought, action, and decision you make. While most people believe they are fully in control of their choices, Buddhism reveals that much of what you think and feel is not arising from conscious awareness, but from deeply embedded mental patterns formed long before you ever noticed them. These patterns are called samskaras, mental impressions that shape perception, behavior, and ultimately, destiny. Samskaras act like grooves in the mind, carved through years of repeated thoughts, emotions, and reactions. Each time you experience something, your subconscious records it, storing it not as a neutral event, but as a blueprint for how to respond in the future. The more a pattern is repeated, the stronger its imprint becomes. Without realizing it, people live their entire lives dictated by these subconscious impressions. A person who is repeatedly told as a child that they are not good enough will, without questioning, carry that belief into adulthood. A person who experienced betrayal in a past relationship may unconsciously expect the same in future relationships, even when no real threat exists. These impressions do not disappear on their own. They continue to shape how thoughts arise, how emotions are processed, and how life unfolds. The mind is rarely still. Beneath the stream of conscious thinking, countless layers of conditioned thought are running in the background, influencing decisions in ways most never recognize. Buddhist meditation was not designed to silence the mind, but to uncover these hidden layers. When sitting in deep meditation, thoughts begin to slow down, allowing deeper mental patterns to surface. Instead of responding automatically to these patterns, meditation teaches awareness. As long as subconscious tendencies remain unseen, they have complete control. The moment they are observed without attachment, they begin to lose their power. Samskaras do not simply exist in the past. They are being reinforced every day. Every reaction strengthens a particular neural pathway, making it easier for similar reactions to arise in the future. This is why certain emotions seem to emerge without reason. A person who constantly responds to stress with frustration is unknowingly reinforcing a habit that will make frustration their natural response in the future. On the other hand, someone who has developed patience and equanimity will instinctively react with calmness, even in difficult situations. The key to changing subconscious patterns is not to fight them, but to become aware of them, to recognize that they are not fixed, but fluid, capable of transformation with the right understanding. The power of subconscious thought is not limited to emotions. It shapes how the world is perceived. Two people can experience the same event and interpret it in completely different ways, not because of the event itself, but because of the samskaras filtering their perception. Someone conditioned by past disappointments may always expect failure, while another conditioned by past success may approach challenges with confidence. The event remains the same, but the interpretation changes according to what is already embedded in the subconscious. This is where mindfulness becomes an essential tool. In ordinary life, most thoughts are mechanical, arising from habit rather than intention. Mindfulness disrupts this process. It forces awareness into moments that would normally go unnoticed, creating a gap between stimulus and reaction. This gap is where transformation happens. A moment of anger, when observed with mindfulness, loses its momentum. A feeling of doubt, when seen without judgment, begins to dissolve. The subconscious no longer operates blindly. It is exposed to the light of awareness. Rewiring subconscious patterns does not happen through force. It happens through understanding. The more you recognize habitual tendencies, the less grip they have over you. When a thought arises from past conditioning, instead of acting on it, you pause, you observe, and in that observation, you weaken its hold. This is the essence of breaking free from karmic cycles, becoming aware of what is usually unconscious, reclaiming control over what was once automatic. But awareness alone is not enough. The mind is constantly absorbing impressions, and if it is not consciously trained, it will continue reinforcing old samskaras. This is why Buddhist practices emphasize not just observation, but intentional mental cultivation. Just as negative habits can be reinforced, positive ones can be planted. A person who repeatedly cultivates thoughts of kindness, patience, and wisdom will, over time, create a subconscious foundation that naturally moves toward peace rather than conflict. Every time a new thought pattern is introduced, it weakens the old. Repetition, combined with mindfulness, reshapes the very structure of the mind. Deep meditation is not about escaping thought, but about diving into it without getting lost. The stillness of meditation reveals what is normally hidden: fears, attachments, desires, and deeply ingrained beliefs. In the beginning, this can be uncomfortable. The mind will resist. But the purpose of meditation is not to suppress what arises. It is to see it clearly, to let it surface without being pulled into identification. Thoughts will come, but instead of following them, you observe. Instead of reacting, you remain still. And in that stillness, the subconscious begins to release its grip. Most suffering comes from the unexamined mind. People believe their struggles come from the external world, but in reality, they stem from the mental patterns filtering their experience of the world. Nothing outside has inherent meaning. The mind assigns meaning based on past impressions. This is why liberation is not found in changing external circumstances, but in changing the way the mind interacts with them. If an old samskara tells you that you are unworthy, no amount of external validation will remove that belief. If a samskara conditions you to expect rejection, even acts of kindness will be interpreted through a lens of distrust. The mind is not seeing reality, it is seeing reflections of itself. Breaking free from subconscious conditioning requires patience. The patterns shaping thoughts today were not formed overnight, and they will not disappear instantly, but every moment of awareness weakens their influence. Each time a reaction is observed, rather than indulged, a small gap is created. Over time, these gaps expand, allowing space for new mental habits to take root. The mind that was once governed by unconscious forces begins to operate with clarity, responding to life rather than blindly reacting to it. This process also transforms relationships. Much of interpersonal conflict arises from projections of past experiences onto present situations. When someone is harsh, the mind may immediately recall past wounds, reacting with defense or resentment. But if there is awareness, if the subconscious pattern is recognized, the reaction does not have to follow. A person who is fully present sees only the current moment, not the echoes of the past. They respond to reality as it is, not as past conditioning dictates it should be. There is no greater freedom than mastering the subconscious mind. When past impressions no longer dictate responses, life opens up in ways previously unimaginable. Fear loses its foundation because it is no longer being fed by unseen mental patterns. Attachment loosens because thoughts no longer dictate identity. The mind becomes fluid, adaptable, capable of meeting each moment without the burden of past conditioning. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize inner work over external control. Changing external circumstances can only bring temporary relief. True peace comes from transforming the mental structures that shape how reality is perceived. When subconscious thought is seen clearly, suffering is no longer inevitable. The world does not have to change for peace to be found. Only the mind does. Every thought that arises carries the weight of past conditioning, but that weight can be lifted. The moment a thought is seen for what it truly is, just an impression, not an absolute truth, it loses its ability to control. Samskaras that once dictated behavior become mere remnants of an old story, one that no longer needs to be followed. And when that story fades, a new kind of mind emerges, one that is no longer bound by unconscious patterns, one that does not react, but responds with clarity, one that does not seek control, but operates from understanding. A mind that is no longer shaped by the past, but is fully awake in the present. This is the beginning of true liberation, and from this point forward, the mind is no longer just an instrument of past conditioning. It becomes a tool for conscious creation. Every thought, every moment of awareness, every shift in perception rewrites the subconscious script. The old patterns dissolve, and in their place, a new foundation is built, one that leads not to suffering, but to freedom. Every thought leaves an imprint, shaping perception and influencing behavior, but its power goes even deeper. Beneath the surface of conscious awareness, thoughts are not just mental constructs, they are energy. This is not metaphorical, it is the very nature of the mind itself. In Buddhist teachings, thought is not separate from the fabric of existence, but is part of the vast energetic field that connects everything. This energy is known as citta, the essence of the mind, and its movement determines the quality of one's internal and external reality. Thought is not passive. It vibrates, resonates, and interacts with the world in ways that most do not perceive. Just as sound waves ripple through space and electric currents flow through wires, mental energy moves through the body, shaping emotions, decisions, and even health. Every thought has a frequency. Some thoughts are heavy, dense, and chaotic, pulling the mind into confusion. Others are light, fluid, and harmonious, creating clarity and peace. The nature of a thought determines the direction of experience. A mind filled with agitation will vibrate at a frequency that attracts struggle. A mind centered in stillness will naturally harmonize with ease. The mind does not exist in isolation. It is always sending and receiving signals, interacting with the environment in ways that go beyond words and actions. The energy of thought shapes how people respond, how opportunities unfold, and even how the body functions. Science has shown that emotions and mental states alter brain waves, influence the nervous system, and affect the body's chemistry. Fear and stress create a cascade of physiological responses. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, and the immune system weakens. Peaceful thoughts do the opposite, signaling relaxation, healing, and balance. Buddhist meditation is not just about calming the mind. It is a method of tuning mental energy. Just as a musician tunes an instrument to produce harmonious sound, meditation aligns thoughts to a state of clarity and coherence. The mind that is scattered, jumping from one thought to another, is like static interference. It creates distortion, making everything feel overwhelming. But when the mind is trained to settle, its energy shifts. Thoughts become refined, precise, and less reactive. The entire nervous system follows, shifting from survival mode to a state of deep awareness. This is why certain states of mind attract different experiences. A person who radiates confidence and inner peace will naturally draw respect and opportunities, while someone caught in a cycle of doubt and negativity will find themselves surrounded by struggle. It is not magic, it is resonance. Just as a tuning fork vibrates in harmony with a specific frequency, the mind aligns itself with the energy it emits. If a mind is filled with anger, it will encounter situations that reinforce that anger. If it is filled with gratitude, it will perceive and experience more reasons to be grateful. Thought energy also influences speech and actions. Words are not just sounds. They carry the energy of the mind that speaks them. This is why a simple sentence can either uplift or wound, depending on the intention behind it. A kind word spoken with sincerity resonates far beyond the moment it is heard. A careless remark spoken in frustration lingers, creating disharmony. The same applies to actions. A gesture of kindness extends beyond its immediate effect, setting off a chain of positive interactions, just as a single act of aggression can trigger conflict that spreads far beyond the original moment. The concept of vibrational energy in thought is not exclusive to Buddhism. Many ancient traditions understood that the mind does not merely process reality, but actively participates in shaping it. In Hindu philosophy, prana is seen as the life force that flows through both the body and mind. In Taoist teachings, Qi is the energetic movement that determines health and balance. Modern science echoes these ideas, demonstrating that brainwaves shift according to thought patterns and that emotional states influence heart rate variability, immune response, and even genetic expression. Mindfulness is the practice of refining mental energy. When the mind is fully present, it no longer generates chaotic vibrations. It moves in alignment with awareness, creating stillness even in movement. This does not mean suppressing thoughts, but rather observing them without interference. A person lost in thought is at the mercy of their mental fluctuations. A person who observes thought without attachment gains control over the quality of their energy. The shift from unconscious reaction to conscious presence changes the very nature of experience. The energy of thought does not stop at the body. It extends into the environment. Just as emotions can be felt in a room without words being spoken, thought energy influences interactions without conscious effort. Walk into a space filled with tension, and the body immediately reacts. Step into a place filled with warmth and kindness, and the nervous system relaxes. This is not superstition, but direct experience. The mind absorbs and emits energy constantly, shaping the atmosphere of relationships, workplaces, and even entire communities. This is why certain individuals naturally bring peace wherever they go. Their thoughts are refined, their presence carries stability. Others, caught in patterns of fear and frustration, unknowingly radiate disharmony, affecting everyone around them. This is why Buddhist masters emphasize the purification of thought. It is not about controlling the external world, but mastering the internal world so that life reflects clarity rather than chaos. Thought energy also explains why repeated mental patterns create self-fulfilling cycles. A person who believes they are unworthy will unconsciously behave in ways that reinforce that belief, attracting situations that confirm it. Someone who holds a deep sense of inner worth will carry themselves with presence, drawing respect and opportunity naturally. These outcomes are not accidents. They are direct consequences of the vibrational quality of thought. This is why change cannot be forced externally. Trying to alter circumstances without shifting mental energy is like repainting a cracked wall without fixing the foundation. The surface may look different temporarily, but the same issues will reappear. Mental vibration affects perception itself. When the mind is clouded with stress, even neutral situations are interpreted as threats. When the mind is clear, even challenges are seen with calm detachment. The world doesn't change, but the way it is experienced does. This is why two people can live through the same event, yet walk away with entirely different understandings. The external world is a reflection of internal energy. Mastering thought energy is not about eliminating all negative emotions. The mind will always generate thoughts, but it is the relationship to those thoughts that determines their impact. When a thought is seen without resistance, it dissolves. When it is clung to or feared, it intensifies. This is why meditation trains the mind to let thoughts rise and fall without interference. The more one observes thought without attachment, the more refined mental energy becomes. The less interference there is, the higher the vibrational frequency. The state of samadhi, or deep meditative absorption, is the purest form of thought energy. In this state, the mind no longer moves between past and future, no longer clings to desires or fears. It exists in perfect stillness, aligned with the natural flow of existence. This is the highest vibrational state, where thought and awareness merge into one. Even outside deep meditation, those who train the mind to remain present carry this frequency with them, affecting everyone they encounter. Thought vibration is not abstract. It is the underlying force shaping experience. It determines not just emotions, but actions, relationships, and even the body's physical state. Every thought is a seed of energy, and the more refined that energy, the more harmonious life becomes. Clarity arises not through struggle, but through stillness. The mind, when left undisturbed by attachment and resistance, naturally returns to its purest state. And in that state, there is no conflict, no unnecessary suffering, only presence, awareness, and the effortless unfolding of life itself. Thoughts are powerful, but they do not define you. Their energy shapes perception, their patterns reinforce habits, and their vibrations influence reality. But they are not who you are. They pass through the mind like waves across the ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes violent, yet the ocean itself remains unchanged. The greatest mistake is believing that a single wave represents the entire sea. This is the illusion of negative thinking, the belief that what arises in the mind must be accepted as truth. Buddhism reveals that thoughts do not belong to anyone. They arise from causes and conditions, influenced by past experiences, external stimuli, and mental conditioning. The mind is a field in which thoughts appear, but none of them are permanent. A negative thought does not mean a negative reality. A fearful thought does not make fear a truth. The nature of thought is movement, always coming and going, yet the suffering begins when attachment takes hold. The moment a thought is believed without question, it becomes a part of identity. Instead of seeing a thought as passing energy, the mind personalizes it. I am anxious. I am worthless. I am failing. The illusion deepens because the thought is given ownership. Mara, in Buddhist tradition, is the personification of illusion, the great deceiver that uses fear, doubt, and temptation to keep the mind entangled in suffering. But Mara does not exist outside of thought. Mara is thought when it is misunderstood. Negative thinking is one of Mara's most deceptive weapons, making people believe that their worst fears are real, that their suffering is permanent, and that their thoughts define them. But like a shadow cast by an illusion, these thoughts have no substance. They arise, they convince, they create suffering, yet the moment they are seen for what they are, their power dissolves. Negative thoughts are not a problem. Clinging to them is the problem. Trying to suppress them is the problem. A mind at war with itself is a mind in suffering. When negative thoughts arise, the instinct is often to resist, to push them away, to replace them with something positive. But suppression only strengthens what is being avoided. When a thought is feared, it is fed. When a thought is fought, it fights back. Resistance is the force that keeps negative thinking alive. Buddhist wisdom teaches the art of detachment, not by forcing thoughts away, but by allowing them to come and go without grasping at them. When a negative thought arises, it is not a command, not a truth, not a permanent mark on identity. It is merely a cloud passing across the sky, seen but not held. Observation is the path to freedom. A thought that is observed without reaction loses its grip. It appears, it moves, it disappears. No force is needed. No battle must be fought. The practice of compassionate observation transforms the way thoughts are experienced. Instead of rejecting negative thoughts, they are met with awareness. Instead of labeling them as problems, they are seen as passing movements of the mind. Just as an old habit loses strength when it is no longer repeated, a negative thought loses power when it is no longer fed with attention. There is no need to fight, only to see. Many spend their lives trapped in a cycle of self-judgment, believing that the presence of negative thoughts means failure, weakness, or lack of control. But thought is not personal. It is conditioned by past experience, shaped by environment, influenced by memory. The mind is a field, not a fixed identity. It does not produce thoughts at will. It receives them like a radio picks up signals. And just as a radio does not choose the frequency it receives, the mind does not always choose the thoughts that arise. But it does have the ability to change the station, to shift attention, to observe rather than engage. The mind that fights against negative thoughts is like a person trying to smooth out ripples in a pond by slamming their hand against the water. The more force used, the greater the disturbance. The ripples settle not by effort, but by stillness. A mind that stops reacting to thought begins to settle in the same way. This is not passive indifference. It is the highest form of mastery. To see thought without being controlled by it. To witness the mind's fluctuations without mistaking them for reality. When the mind is left undisturbed, thoughts naturally lose intensity. They arise, but they do not stick. They appear, but they do not define. This is why deep meditation is not an escape from thought, but an awakening to its true nature. A thought is only as strong as the attention given to it. Left alone, even the most fearful thoughts pass. Left unresisted, even the heaviest emotions dissolve. Suffering arises not from negative thoughts, but from the belief that they must be acted upon. A moment of doubt does not require a reaction. A passing worry does not need a solution. Awareness does not mean indulging thoughts, nor does it mean ignoring them. It means seeing them clearly for what they are, impermanent, empty, without inherent truth. This understanding changes everything. The mind no longer needs to force positivity, no longer needs to escape itself. Peace is not created by filling the mind with better thoughts. It arises when thoughts lose their ability to disturb. The nature of thought is transience. The mind is only trapped when it identifies with what is temporary. Compassionate observation allows for the full spectrum of thought without suffering. It is the difference between being caught in a storm and watching the storm from a distance. The winds may be strong, the rain heavy, but the observer is untouched. This is the highest form of freedom, not the elimination of negative thoughts, but liberation from their influence. The world will always provide reasons to worry. The mind will always generate reasons to doubt. Fear will come, frustration will arise, uncertainty will surface. But none of these things define reality unless the mind clings to them. The moment a thought is seen without attachment, it becomes weightless. It may be there, but it doesn't control. It may arise, but it doesn't last. This is the path beyond suffering, not control, not suppression, not forced positivity, only awareness. A mind that sees thought without grasping at it is a mind that is truly free. And this freedom is available at any moment, not through struggle, but through the simple act of letting go. Letting go of negative thoughts does not mean replacing them with extreme positivity. Many believe that to escape suffering, the mind must be filled with optimism, that every negative thought must be countered with a positive affirmation. But Buddhism does not teach this. The problem is not in the type of thought, but in attachment to thought itself. Whether positive or negative, clinging to thoughts distorts reality. True peace is not found in endlessly chasing uplifting thoughts, but in seeing things as they are without distortion. This is the middle way, the path that moves beyond optimism and pessimism, beyond attachment to any extreme. Extreme positivity can be just as blinding as negativity. Those who try to force happiness, suppress difficulty, and insist that life must always be pleasant often find themselves exhausted, confused, and unprepared for hardship. When suffering is ignored in favor of forced optimism, it does not disappear. It grows beneath the surface. People who constantly tell themselves to just think positive often find that the deeper fears, doubts, and anxieties do not leave. They are merely hidden. A mind that insists on looking only at the bright side is still caught in resistance, still running from reality, still creating an inner battle. The middle way in Buddhism is the rejection of extremes. It does not advocate drowning in negativity, but it also does not encourage delusional positivity. The mind must be trained to hold both joy and pain without clinging to either. To be free of suffering is not to eliminate all difficulty, but to no longer be shaken by it. Life is unpredictable. There will be moments of happiness and moments of loss. Those who cling to positivity may feel secure when things are good, but will collapse when things turn difficult. Those who embrace the middle way remain steady, regardless of external circumstances. Mental framing is not about forcing a perspective, but about refining perception. It is the art of seeing life clearly, acknowledging both beauty and struggle without becoming trapped in either. Optimism has its place, but it must be balanced with realism. To see the world as better than it is leads to disappointment. To see it as worse than it is leads to despair. The path to wisdom is in seeing life as it truly is, free from illusion, free from bias. Equanimity, or upekkha, is the foundation of mental balance. It is not indifference, nor is it apathy. It is the ability to hold space for both joy and sorrow without being controlled by either. A person with equanimity does not reject pleasure, but they do not cling to it. They do not avoid pain, but they do not collapse under its weight. Their mind remains steady, like a mountain untouched by passing storms. Many misunderstand equanimity, believing it to be cold detachment, but it is the deepest form of presence. It does not numb experience, it refines perception. When one is caught in emotional extremes, clarity is lost. When the mind is steady, wisdom arises. A person ruled by positivity may deny pain, and a person ruled by negativity may deny hope. But the one who cultivates equanimity sees both without distortion. The illusion of control often leads people to seek comfort in positive thinking, believing that by focusing only on good outcomes, they can shape reality to their liking. But reality is not controlled by thought alone. The world moves according to causes and conditions, not personal wishes. To insist that things must always go well is to set oneself up for suffering. A mind trained in the middle way is prepared for all possibilities. It does not live in fear, nor does it live in fantasy. It lives in awareness. Balancing thought does not mean suppressing emotions. It means recognizing them for what they are, temporary states, passing like clouds across the sky. A person who cultivates equanimity does not react impulsively to every thought or feeling. They see thoughts arise, they feel emotions move, but they do not chase after them. They let them pass, untouched, unstuck. This creates a mind that is free, not from difficulty but from unnecessary suffering. True peace does not come from avoiding hardship, but from developing the strength to remain steady in its presence. The problem with extreme positivity is that it avoids half of life. To insist that only good things must happen is to resist the nature of existence itself. All things rise and fall. Happiness comes and goes. People change. Loss is inevitable. But the one who follows the middle way does not cling when things are good, and doesn't despair when things are difficult. They flow with life, rather than fight against it. Clarity of mind does not mean forcing thoughts into a desired shape, but understanding their nature. Thoughts are neither enemies nor saviors. They arise, they pass, they hold no true weight unless attachment gives them power. A person ruled by positivity may struggle deeply when things do not go their way, just as a person ruled by negativity may fail to see opportunities when they arise. The middle way holds neither extreme. It is the path of stillness in motion, of being fully engaged in life without being imprisoned by it. The greatest strength is not in avoiding suffering, but in meeting it with wisdom. This is why equanimity is the highest form of mental mastery. It is not about shutting out emotions, but about letting them pass without losing center. When happiness comes, one enjoys it without attachment. When suffering comes, one endures it without resistance. The mind does not get lost in what-ifs, does not cling to hopes, does not collapse under fear. It remains still. It remains aware. It remains free. Those who understand this no longer chase after happiness, because they see that true contentment is not found in what changes. They no longer run from suffering, because they see that all things pass. They move through life as one moves through a river, without trying to hold on to the water, without trying to stop the current. They let it flow. To train the mind in equanimity is to step beyond the illusions of control. It is to see things clearly, to accept them fully, and to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. It is to walk through life with a heart that is open, yet unshaken. And in this, there is a freedom beyond anything that positivity or negativity could ever provide. The mind does not just process thoughts, it weaves them into emotions, shaping every experience from within. The illusion of emotional truth is one of the strongest forces in human suffering. People believe their emotions are direct reflections of reality, that feeling anxious means there is danger, that feeling unworthy means they lack value, that feeling rejected means they are alone. But emotions do not emerge from external events. They arise from thoughts. And thoughts, as already seen, are conditioned, fleeting, and often untrue. Buddhism reveals that emotions are not forces beyond control, nor are they inherent facts about existence. They are the mind's response to its own interpretations. A situation itself does not create fear, anger, or sadness. The meaning assigned to the situation does. The same event can cause joy in one person and despair in another, not because the event has changed, but because the thoughts about it are different. This is the thought-emotion loop, a cycle where thoughts generate emotions, and emotions then reinforce those same thoughts, creating patterns that can shape an entire life without being questioned. Breaking free from emotional reactivity begins with seeing how emotions are formed. A single thought, if left unchecked, can spiral into an entire mental state. A small worry can grow into full panic. A passing frustration can become uncontrollable anger. This is not because the emotion is inevitable, but because it is being fed by continuous thought. The more the mind fixates on an idea, the more the body responds. Heart rate changes, breath shortens, muscles tense. The body believes the mind's story, even if the story is false. Vedana, or feeling tone awareness, is a Buddhist practice that reveals the mechanics of emotion. Every experience carries an initial impression, a subtle signal of pleasure, discomfort, or neutrality. This feeling tone happens before conscious thought takes over. When left unnoticed, the mind reacts instinctively. A slight discomfort turns into irritation. A small pleasure turns into craving. But when awareness is present, the mind sees the feeling tone before it grows into full emotion. It recognizes the spark before it becomes fire. A person who lacks this awareness is ruled by emotional reactions. If something feels unpleasant, they resist it. If something feels good, they chase it. They do not see that these responses are conditioned, automatic, and often destructive. But a person who observes feeling tones can intercept emotional patterns before they take hold. They can feel discomfort without turning it into suffering. They can experience joy without attachment. They can meet emotions as passing visitors, not as masters. Breaking emotional reactivity does not mean suppressing emotions. It means seeing them as they are, temporary, constructed, and optional. The mind that reacts to every feeling is trapped in an endless cycle of pleasure and pain. But the mind that watches emotion without immediate response gains freedom. When frustration arises, it is seen before it takes over. When fear appears, it is noted without being believed. A space forms between feeling and reaction, and in that space, wisdom emerges. The reason emotions feel overwhelming is not because they are powerful, but because they are unquestioned. The moment an emotion is recognized as a thought-formed experience rather than a fundamental truth, it begins to lose its grip. Anger without a supporting story fades. Fear without imagined danger dissolves. Sadness without mental attachment lightens. Most people assume that emotions happen to them, that they are passive recipients of whatever their mind decides to feel. But this is a misunderstanding. Emotions do not impose themselves. They are sustained by thought. A fear that is not fed with fearful thinking disappears. A resentment that is not replayed in the mind weakens. A craving that is not reinforced through imagined pleasure fades. This is not suppression, but the natural dissolution of emotion when it is not held in place by belief. The body reacts to emotions as if they are real threats. Stress triggers the nervous system, preparing for danger even when no actual threat exists. This is why fear can be felt so intensely, even when nothing is wrong. The body is not responding to reality, it is responding to thought. And just as negative emotions create physical tension, calming the mind creates relaxation. Breath slows, muscles soften. The body mirrors the state of the mind. To change emotional patterns, thought patterns must be changed, not by forcing positivity, but by withdrawing belief from unhelpful narratives. A thought about failure can create anxiety, but if it is seen clearly as just a thought, it has no lasting effect. A memory of betrayal can bring anger, but if it is recognized as past and not present, it loses intensity. This is the difference between being trapped by emotion and being free from it. Meditation trains the mind to see emotions before they take control. Sitting in stillness, emotions arise, but without reaction, they pass. The mind learns that it does not have to engage with every feeling, that it can watch without being swept away. Over time, emotional resilience builds. What once caused distress becomes insignificant. What once triggered pain loses power. The space between thought and reaction grows, and in that space, peace is found. The strongest emotions are those that have been reinforced for years. A person who has lived with anxiety for decades will find their mind automatically generating anxious thoughts. A person who has been conditioned to anger will find irritation rising before they even realize it. These patterns are deeply ingrained, but they are not permanent. Every moment of awareness weakens them. Every time an emotion is seen rather than indulged, its hold diminishes. This understanding transforms relationships. Many conflicts are not based on real harm, but on emotional reactions to perceived harm. Words are misinterpreted. Actions are judged through the filter of past wounds. But when emotions are no longer seen as absolute truth, misunderstandings dissolve. A person who does not take emotions personally does not fall into unnecessary conflict. They respond with clarity rather than react with old pain. Emotions will always arise, but their influence depends on how they are met. A mind that reacts impulsively is a mind controlled by its own conditioning, but a mind that observes emotion with detachment is a mind that remains in balance. This is not about coldness or suppression, but about freedom, the ability to feel without being ruled by feeling. When emotions are understood as temporary and thought-formed, suffering lessens, no longer held hostage by moods, no longer driven by impulses. The mind moves with clarity. It does not fear emotion, nor does it chase after it. It allows everything to arise and pass naturally, untouched, unmoved, at peace. This is the end of emotional reactivity, the beginning of true inner stability. The struggle with emotions begins and ends with how thoughts are perceived. The illusion of ownership, the belief that thoughts define identity, is the root of suffering. People do not suffer because of passing thoughts. They suffer because they take them personally. A single thought arises, and instead of letting it pass, the mind clings to it, assigns it meaning, and builds an entire identity around it. But what if thoughts were not personal? What if they did not belong to anyone? What if they were merely reflections, appearing and disappearing like light on water? Buddhism teaches that the mind is not a generator of reality, but a mirror. It doesn't create thoughts, it reflects them. Just as a mirror doesn't control what appears before it, the mind doesn't control the thoughts that arise within it. But the moment attachment forms, the reflection is mistaken for reality. The mind becomes entangled in its own projections, believing them to be solid, permanent, and personal. This is the fundamental illusion. Shunyata, or emptiness, is the key to understanding this illusion. It does not mean nothingness, nor does it imply meaninglessness. It means that nothing has inherent existence, including thoughts. Every thought arises from causes and conditions, shaped by experience, memory, and environment. It appears in the mind, stays for a moment, then disappears. But without understanding emptiness, thoughts are misinterpreted as truth. Instead of being seen as fleeting reflections, they are held onto, believed, and identified with. A thought about failure arises, and the mind claims it as its own. I am a failure. A thought about regret appears, and the mind clings to it. I have made mistakes that define me. But these are only reflections, not solid realities. A mirror does not become the image it reflects, and the mind does not become the thoughts that move through it. But the moment identification happens, suffering begins. Zen practice teaches the art of seeing thoughts without grasping them. The mind, like a mirror, remains untouched no matter what appears in it. A fearful thought arises, but it is not the mind itself. A joyful thought arises, but it is not the mind itself. A reflection of anger may pass through, but it does not stain the mirror. This is the highest form of freedom, not controlling thoughts, but seeing them as they are. Without this understanding, the mind becomes trapped in reaction. A thought appears, and instead of passing naturally, it is grasped, analyzed, and expanded. It takes root, multiplying into new thoughts, creating an endless cycle of mental entanglement. This is how suffering deepens, not because of the thought itself, but because of the belief that it must be controlled, fixed, or owned. The greatest misunderstanding is the belief that the mind is the source of suffering. But the mind does not create pain. Attachment does. The mind does not cause distress. Identification does. When thoughts are seen as passing reflections, they lose their weight. They appear and vanish without leaving scars. Just as clouds pass across the sky without affecting the sky itself, thoughts pass through awareness without changing its essence. The sky does not cling to clouds, nor does it reject them. It allows them to come and go, untouched and unmoved. The mind, when trained, functions the same way. Thoughts, emotions, and perceptions arise, but they are not held. They are met with stillness. A mind that sees itself as a mirror cannot be disturbed by passing images. It does not fight what appears, nor does it chase what is pleasant. It remains steady, reflecting everything without clinging to anything. This is the essence of mental clarity. Not silence, not control, but non-attachment. Suffering is not in the presence of thoughts, but in the failure to see their emptiness. The moment a thought is seen for what it truly is, impermanent, without inherent meaning, it loses its ability to create distress. No matter how strong an emotion, no matter how persistent a memory, if it is observed without grasping, it fades. This is not suppression, but liberation. Many try to escape suffering by controlling thoughts, but control is itself a form of attachment. To push a thought away is to engage with it, to struggle against it, to strengthen its presence. But to see it clearly, without judgment or resistance, is to let it dissolve. A thought unresisted is a thought that disappears. The nature of mind is vast, formless, and free. It is only the belief in ownership that creates limitation. The idea that thoughts belong to a self, that they define character, that they dictate reality. These are illusions that bind the mind to suffering. But the moment this illusion is seen through, the entire structure collapses. The mind remains as it always was, open, spacious, and untouched by passing reflections. Zen meditation is not about stopping thought. It is about seeing thought without being deceived by it. When sitting in stillness, thoughts will come. They will try to convince, demand attention, create emotions. But the practice is to watch without attachment, to let them come and go without interference, to sit like a mountain in a storm, unshaken, undisturbed. This understanding extends to every aspect of life. In conversation, thoughts arise, but they do not need to be spoken. In conflict, emotions surface, but they do not need to be acted upon. In solitude, memories emerge, but they do not need to be followed. The mirror reflects all things, but it does not hold them. When this is understood deeply, peace becomes natural. There is no need to control what cannot be controlled, no need to grasp what was never solid. The world moves, thoughts rise, emotions shift, but awareness remains steady. This is the freedom of the mirror mind, open, clear, and forever beyond suffering. Thoughts appear and disappear, but some leave deeper imprints than others. The mind reflects reality, but when unexamined thoughts are left unchecked, they begin to distort perception. This distortion is not random. It follows patterns that keep suffering alive. Buddhism identifies three fundamental distortions that poison the mind, keeping it trapped in endless cycles of craving, aversion, and ignorance. These poisons are not external forces. They are self-generated illusions, strengthening themselves through habitual thinking. Left unseen, they shape behavior, influence emotions, and create suffering without awareness. Lobha, or desire, is the first poison. It operates subtly, often disguising itself as motivation, ambition, or the pursuit of happiness. It convinces the mind that fulfillment exists somewhere outside of this moment. that something is missing, and that contentment can only be found in acquiring more possessions, more experiences, more approval. But the mind that chases is never satisfied. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another arises. There is no end to its hunger, because it is built on the illusion that happiness depends on external gain. The problem is not in having desires, but in being owned by them. When the mind believes that peace will only come after obtaining something, it remains restless. The cycle continues, reaching, grasping, craving, yet nothing truly satisfies, because the root of the suffering was never in the lack of things, but in the attachment to the idea that they are necessary for peace. Dosa, or aversion, is the second poison. If desire is the craving for what is absent, aversion is the rejection of what is present. It manifests as anger, resentment, irritation, and fear. It convinces the mind that suffering comes from external conditions, from difficult people, from unpleasant situations, and that if only these things were removed, peace would be possible. But resistance does not remove suffering, it deepens it. When the mind fights against what is, it becomes trapped in its own resistance. Aversion keeps the mind locked in judgment, making every moment a battlefield where everything is either an enemy to defeat or a problem to fix. The more the mind rejects discomfort, the stronger the discomfort becomes. Moha, or delusion, is the most dangerous poison because it blinds the mind to the truth of its own suffering. It is not just ignorance, it is the mistaken belief that one already understands. It keeps people trapped in illusion, believing in a separate self, attaching to fleeting experiences, mistaking impermanence for permanence. Delusion makes suffering seem inevitable because it prevents the mind from seeing its own role in creating it. It hides the nature of thought, convincing the mind that it is solid, real, and trustworthy. It keeps one believing that happiness and suffering are dictated by external events rather than internal perception. These three poisons reinforce each other. Desire leads to attachment, and when attachment is threatened, aversion arises. When aversion strengthens suffering, delusion convinces the mind that the problem is external rather than internal. This cycle repeats endlessly, deepening mental habits and reinforcing patterns of dissatisfaction. Each poison feeds the next, creating an ongoing loop that shapes not only thought, but behavior, emotions, and relationships. The mind conditioned by desire is restless, never content with the present moment. It looks ahead, waiting for the next achievement, the next source of pleasure, the next distraction. It moves from one craving to the next, believing that fulfillment is always just beyond reach. This creates exhaustion. When nothing ever feels like enough, even moments of happiness are overshadowed by the fear of loss or the pressure to maintain them. The antidote is contentment, not through force, but through wisdom. Seeing the nature of desire removes its power. It does not mean rejecting all pleasure, but recognizing that no external object, experience, or person can create lasting fulfillment. True peace is not found in getting what is wanted, but in no longer being controlled by wanting. The mind conditioned by aversion is reactive, caught in cycles of resistance. It pushes away discomfort, labels experiences as problems, and fights against anything it dislikes. But suffering does not come from difficult situations. It comes from the refusal to accept them. When something unpleasant arises, the natural reaction is to resist, to wish it away, to complain about it. But resistance only makes suffering stronger. The antidote is acceptance, not passive resignation, but the deep understanding that reality is not an enemy to be fought. When the mind meets discomfort without resistance, suffering weakens. Nothing is permanent. No moment lasts forever. When this is fully understood, the need to push things away disappears. The mind conditioned by delusion is unconscious, lost in distraction, unaware of its own habits. It believes that happiness and suffering are controlled by the world rather than by perception. It does not question thoughts, does not investigate emotions, does not seek clarity. This blindness keeps the mind running in habitual loops, unaware that it holds the key to its own freedom. The antidote is awareness, not intellectual knowledge, but direct experience. Seeing thought as thought, seeing emotion as passing, seeing the self as a collection of ever-changing conditions, this breaks the illusion of permanence. The more awareness sharpens, the more delusion fades. Meditation is the direct method of antidote. Sitting in stillness, the three poisons reveal themselves. The mind will reach for distractions, craving entertainment, planning for the future. Desire will appear. The mind will resist discomfort, feel restless, impatient, annoyed. Aversion will arise. The mind will wander, get lost in thought, mistake its own projections for reality. Delusion will surface. But meditation is not about suppressing these tendencies. It is about seeing them clearly. Each moment of awareness weakens their influence. Desire loses power when it is no longer chased. When a craving arises and is simply observed rather than followed, it weakens. The mind sees that desire itself is not suffering. It is the attachment to it that creates unrest. When aversion arises, if it is met with non-resistance, it dissolves. When delusion is exposed to direct awareness, it cannot survive. The poisons do not need to be fought. They dissolve in the presence of clear seeing. Outside meditation, this practice continues. When faced with discomfort, one can pause and observe. Is the suffering coming from the situation or from the resistance to it? When a craving arises, one can ask, is this desire necessary or is it a habit? When a strong emotion surfaces, one can examine, is this feeling based on reality or is it a mental projection? The more these poisons are seen for what they are, the less influence they have. These poisons do not belong to individuals. They are universal tendencies of the mind. Everyone experiences them. They are not personal flaws, but conditioned patterns that have been reinforced over time. No one is free from them at the start, but everyone has the ability to break free from their grip. The process is gradual, but every moment of clarity weakens their hold. The mind that is free from these poisons moves through life without unnecessary suffering. It does not grasp for more because it is already enough. It does not resist discomfort because it understands impermanence. It does not cling to illusion because it sees things as they are. This is the path to freedom, not through force, not through denial, but through the simple act of seeing clearly. In that seeing, the poisons fade, leaving only clarity, balance, and peace. The poisons of the mind, desire, aversion, and delusion, bind thought into rigid cycles, making change seem impossible. The harder one tries to force transformation through effort, the stronger these patterns resist. But true change doesn't happen through direct struggle. It occurs in the spaces between thoughts, in the quiet pauses where the mind momentarily stops grasping. The illusion is that thinking is the key to transformation, that analyzing problems, setting mental goals, and pushing for change will bring freedom. But real shifts happen in stillness, not in mental noise. Thoughts move in loops, repeating themselves endlessly. They circle around the same doubts, fears, and desires, creating the illusion of progress while reinforcing old patterns. The mind believes that by thinking more, by applying effort, by continuously engaging with its own content, it will arrive at a solution. But thought itself cannot break free from thought. A problem created by thinking cannot be solved by thinking more. This is why transformation is not linear. It does not happen through a direct push, but through the gaps between thoughts, where the mind is not caught in its own patterns. Samadhi, deep concentration, is the space where these gaps widen. It is not about controlling thought, but about allowing the mind to settle so deeply that habitual cycles lose momentum. When awareness becomes steady, thought slows. The usual stories do not take hold. Instead of a continuous stream of reaction, there are pauses, stillness, moments where identification weakens. These pauses are where transformation happens, not in the noise of mental effort, but in the quiet absence of struggle. Most people believe they must think their way into change. They try to reason their way out of suffering, convince themselves of new beliefs, force a new mindset. But effortful thinking is still within the realm of conditioned thought. It still operates within the same structure. It does not transcend, it rearranges. This is why, even when people attempt to change, they find themselves returning to old patterns. Thought cannot escape its own limitations, but when the mind becomes still, something deeper shifts. The patterns lose power because they are no longer being fed. Meditation is not about suppressing thought, but about seeing its nature. When the mind is deeply focused, absorbed in presence, the habitual patterns of grasping and aversion weaken. The silence between thoughts grows wider. The identification with mental content fades. The mind no longer clings to each passing thought, no longer gets caught in reaction. This is not something that can be forced. It happens naturally when stillness is cultivated. These silent gaps are not empty. They are full of potential. In the absence of habitual thought, awareness becomes clear. It is no longer filtered through past conditioning. It no longer carries the weight of attachment. This clarity is where transformation happens. It does not come through mental strain, but through the absence of resistance. Thought cycles persist because they are constantly reinforced. Every time a fear-based thought is engaged with, it strengthens. Every time a craving is followed, the habit deepens. But when thought arises, and there is no reaction, no grasping, no belief in its importance, it loses power. It appears, but it does not take root. It moves, but it does not leave a trace. This is how patterns dissolve, not through force, but through non-engagement. Samadhi is not a mystical state, but a natural deepening of awareness. It is the mind resting in itself, free from distraction, free from the push and pull of conditioned thought. In this state, the usual noise fades. There is no attachment to the past, no projection into the future. The mind is simply present, and in that presence, transformation occurs, not because something is being done, but because everything unnecessary falls away. This is why meditation rewires thought patterns without effort. The usual mental habits weaken not by force, but by lack of attention. The mind that no longer clings to negative cycles no longer creates them. The more stillness deepens, the more space there is between thoughts, and in that space, freedom arises. For those who have spent a lifetime caught in overthinking, this truth is difficult to grasp. The idea that effort is not required for change seems counterintuitive, but effort reinforces the very patterns one seeks to break. It strengthens the illusion that struggle is necessary. In reality, struggle is what keeps suffering alive. When thought is left alone, without grasping or rejection, it naturally dissolves. The patterns that once seemed unbreakable begin to fade, not because they were fought, but because they were no longer believed in. Deep concentration is not about creating silence, but about allowing silence to reveal itself. When thought slows, awareness becomes sharper. The mind no longer jumps from one idea to the next, no longer clings to mental noise. This is not suppression, but refinement. It is the natural settling of the mind, just as a still lake reflects the sky without distortion. Transformation does not happen in a straight line. It does not move from one fixed point to another. It unfolds in the gaps, in the pauses, where the old patterns no longer hold power. The mind that is always engaged never experiences these gaps, never allows space for change to take root. But the mind that rests, that allows stillness to deepen, that does not interfere with its own movement, this mind undergoes radical transformation, not through force but through freedom. The old cycles continue only as long as they are believed in. Thought appears, the mind identifies with it, and the cycle repeats. But when thought arises and is seen without attachment, it no longer binds. It is like a sound passing through the air. It appears, but it does not remain. This is the nature of true transformation. It does not come from forcing thought in a new direction, but from letting go of thought altogether. The deeper the silence, the more profound the shift. Those who have experienced this directly understand that peace is not created, it is uncovered. It has always been present beneath the noise of thought. The work is not in changing the mind, but in stepping out of identification with it. When this happens, suffering dissolves on its own. The mind no longer fights itself, no longer seeks something outside of the present moment, no longer struggles to fix what was never broken. It simply rests, and in that rest, everything changes. Stillness reveals the gaps where change takes root. But transformation does not arrive in grand, sweeping moments. It unfolds in the smallest shifts, in the barely noticeable spaces where thought changes direction without force. The mistake is believing that life is altered only by drastic events, dramatic decisions, or massive effort. In reality, the most profound transformations happen through the tiniest mental adjustments, the subtle shifts in perception that gradually reshape behavior, emotions, and understanding. Change does not come from struggling against old patterns, but from the unnoticed moments when a thought moves differently, when awareness deepens, when the mind quietly lets go of what once seemed unshakable. Buddhism teaches that nothing in life shifts all at once. The mind, like nature, moves in gradual unfolding. A tree does not grow overnight. A river does not carve a canyon in a day, and the mind does not change in an instant. The transformation that appears sudden is only the result of countless small shifts accumulating over time. The mistake is assuming that because these shifts are small, they are insignificant. But every habit, every belief, every emotional reaction is the result of repeated mental patterns. One small shift in perception, one moment of deeper awareness, one instance of seeing clearly. These are the seeds of lasting transformation. The mind is shaped by what it repeatedly focuses on. When certain thoughts are entertained over and over, they create patterns that solidify into belief. But just as these patterns are built over time, they can be reshaped. A single thought may seem unimportant, but when it changes direction, it sets off a chain reaction. The shift may be as simple as questioning an assumption instead of believing it. It may be pausing before reacting instead of following an automatic impulse. It may be recognizing that a passing emotion does not need to define an entire experience. These adjustments seem minor, but when they happen consistently, they reshape perception at its foundation. The practice of Yoniso Manasikara, or wise attention, is the key to this gradual transformation. It is the ability to direct awareness skillfully, to notice the underlying tendencies of the mind, and to adjust them with clarity. Most people react to life unconsciously, caught in conditioned thought loops, unaware that their experience is shaped by the way they focus attention. But when awareness is applied deliberately, when attention is placed on the roots of thought rather than just its surface, change begins at the level where it truly matters. Wise attention does not mean forcing positivity or rejecting difficult experiences. It means examining thought with precision, seeing the subtle ways the mind reinforces suffering, and gently shifting perspective without resistance. A thought arises. Without awareness, it is believed, reacted to, and followed. With awareness, it is seen as just a thought, questioned, and allowed to pass. This single moment of wise attention, repeated again and again, transforms the mind from within. Small shifts in thought reshape emotional responses. When the mind habitually reacts with frustration, anger, or fear, it is not because these emotions are inevitable, but because they have been reinforced over time. The way out is not in suppressing emotions, but in shifting how they are processed. Instead of reacting instantly, there is a pause. Instead of assuming a thought is true, there is a moment of questioning. Instead of being consumed by emotion, there is space to observe it. These micro-adjustments break the automatic nature of suffering. Behavior follows perception. The way a person sees themselves, others, and the world determines their actions. A mind that constantly feeds thoughts of inadequacy will act from insecurity. A mind that assumes the worst in others will interact with defensiveness. A mind that clings to expectations will experience disappointment. But when perception shifts, even slightly, behavior follows. When the mind starts recognizing its own patterns, change begins naturally. The effort is not in forcing new behaviors, but in allowing them to unfold as old perspectives dissolve. Reality itself is filtered through the lens of thought. The world is not experienced as it is, but as it is perceived. A person who believes they are unlucky will find proof of misfortune in every setback. A person who feels unworthy will interpret neutral events as confirmation of their lack of value. These interpretations are not reality. They are mental projections. When the mind starts noticing these projections, questioning them, and shifting its focus, the experience of life changes without anything external needing to be different. This is the reason small shifts lead to radical transformation. When the underlying structure of thought changes, everything built upon it changes as well. It does not require a forceful break from the past. It requires repeated moments of awareness, gentle adjustments in perception, consistent recognition of thought patterns that no longer serve. Over time, these shifts accumulate. The mind that once reacted with fear begins responding with calm. The mind that once chased external validation finds contentment in stillness. The mind that once felt burdened by suffering realizes it is not trapped. Meditation deepens this process. Sitting in stillness, thought patterns become clearer. Instead of being lost in the constant movement of the mind, awareness watches thought arise and fade. This simple act of observing without grasping, repeated over time, weakens the grip of conditioned mental habits. The more frequently the mind returns to presence, the more naturally old patterns dissolve. The shift does not happen through effortful change. It happens in the unnoticed spaces where perception alters without resistance. A single moment of clarity where the mind recognizes that it does not have to believe every thought, that it is not defined by fleeting emotions, that reality is not fixed by past conditioning. This moment is enough to set change in motion. Every great transformation begins with something small. A single crack in an old belief system weakens the entire structure. A single moment of presence interrupts years of habitual thought. A single shift in perception sets off a chain reaction that alters the course of a life. These shifts are not always dramatic. They happen quietly, subtly, in the spaces where awareness deepens and the mind no longer clings. The illusion is that change requires struggle, that to break free from suffering, one must fight against it. But fighting strengthens what is being resisted. The real path is in allowing the mind to see clearly, in letting perception adjust naturally. There is no need to force transformation. The mind, when given the space to observe itself, will unfold in its own way, at its own pace. This unfolding is the essence of freedom. It does not require external validation, dramatic realizations, or intense effort. It requires only the willingness to meet each moment with awareness, to recognize that thought is not reality, that perception can shift, and that transformation is always happening, not through force, but through the smallest movements of the mind toward clarity. The mind unfolds in small, unnoticed shifts, creating the reality that is experienced moment by moment. There is no sudden leap into transformation, no external force pulling circumstances into place. Yet, many believe that thoughts have the power to shape reality through attraction, that focusing on a desire will summon it into existence. This idea, popularized in many modern teachings, suggests that if the mind fixates on success, wealth, or happiness, these things will naturally be drawn toward it. But Buddhism offers a different perspective, one that does not rely on attraction but on causation, one that does not focus on forcing outcomes but on purifying the inner conditions that shape experience. Western manifestation theories revolve around the idea that thoughts send signals into the universe, attracting experiences that match their frequency. The belief is that by thinking positively and visualizing desired results, a person can reshape external circumstances. This approach assumes that thoughts alone create reality, that focusing on abundance will bring wealth, that imagining love will summon relationships, that picturing success will lead to achievement. While intention plays a role in shaping experience, this perspective overlooks a fundamental truth. Thoughts alone do not create reality. They must align with action, wisdom, and the deeper karmic forces that shape existence. Buddhism does not dismiss the power of thought, but refines the understanding of how it influences life. The mind is not a magnet that pulls things toward it. It is a field of energy that generates causes and conditions. The principle of karma is not about attracting what is wanted, but about setting the right causes for the right outcomes. A mind filled with anger does not simply attract more anger, it creates the conditions for suffering. A mind that cultivates patience and generosity does not merely pull kindness toward it. It plants the seeds that will naturally grow into peaceful circumstances. Change does not happen because of wishful thinking. It happens because of alignment with reality. This is why Buddhism places emphasis on inner purification rather than external attraction. The question is not whether the universe will respond to thought, but whether the mind is conditioned in a way that supports the outcomes it seeks. A person who visualizes success but carries self-doubt, laziness, or attachment to immediate comfort is not aligning with the causes of success. A person who fixates on love but remains trapped in emotional instability or fear of rejection is not creating the conditions for deep connection. The focus must shift from external results to internal cultivation. Thought purification is the process of clearing the mental field so that the right conditions can unfold naturally. This is not about forcing positivity or denying difficulty. It is about removing the distortions that block the mind from seeing clearly. A mind that constantly dwells in negativity, doubt, or fear is not simply attracting bad circumstances. It is operating from a limited perspective that reinforces suffering. When these mental obstructions are seen and released, the mind becomes lighter, more open, and more in harmony with beneficial causes. Karma functions not as a reward system, but as an intricate web of causes and effects. Every thought, word, and action sets something in motion. A single moment of clarity can redirect the course of an entire life. A decision made from wisdom rather than impulse can change the trajectory of a situation. A habit broken through awareness can free the mind from years of conditioned suffering. This process is not random. It follows laws as precise as those that govern nature. Just as a seed will grow into a tree when given the right conditions, the mind will manifest experiences based on the patterns it nurtures. Western manifestation often emphasizes the need to eliminate negative thinking, to push away doubts, to maintain an unbroken sense of belief. But Buddhism teaches that suppression does not create clarity. Avoiding negative thoughts does not dissolve them. Ignoring difficult emotions does not purify the mind. Instead, true purification happens through awareness, by seeing thoughts as they arise, by understanding their roots, by letting go of identification with them. The mind is not meant to be controlled by force. It is meant to be understood. This is why mindfulness is the key to creating the right causes rather than chasing the right outcomes. When awareness sharpens, thought patterns become clear. The mind starts to recognize its own habits, its tendencies toward craving, fear, or avoidance. This recognition is not meant to create guilt or force immediate change. It is meant to bring clarity. The moment a thought is seen without attachment, it loses its ability to unconsciously control behavior. This is the foundation of transformation, not through attraction, but through insight. Action follows thought. A mind that is conditioned by fear will take hesitant, self-sabotaging actions. A mind that is trained in patience and wisdom will move with steadiness and purpose. The person who believes in manifestation may spend time visualizing success, but remain inactive in the real world. The person who understands causality will cultivate discipline, learn skills, apply effort, and create the conditions for success to unfold naturally. The difference is subtle but profound. One approach waits for life to align, the other aligns itself with life. Purification of thought does not mean erasing all difficulty. It means refining perception so that difficulty is met with wisdom rather than reactivity. A person who sees obstacles as failures strengthens a mindset of defeat. A person who sees them as lessons strengthens resilience. The difference is not in what happens, but in how it is framed. The external world does not need to change for suffering to end. Only perception must shift. Manifestation teaches that reality responds to thought, but Buddhism teaches that reality responds to causes. The mind does not attract what it desires. It shapes the path through which experiences unfold. A person who plants seeds of patience, generosity, and discipline will naturally see their life take a certain course. A person who plants seeds of grasping, fear, and avoidance will see another course unfold. This is not superstition. It is the direct result of how the mind conditions itself over time. When thoughts are purified, decisions become clearer. When decisions become clearer, actions become more aligned. When actions are aligned, life unfolds in a way that supports growth rather than suffering. This is not magic. It is a process as natural as water finding its level. A person who cultivates a calm and stable mind will not need to seek external peace. It will emerge as a reflection of inner stability. A person who cultivates wisdom will not need to chase success. It will naturally arise as a consequence of skillful actions. The great misunderstanding is believing that thought alone holds power. Thought is a starting point, but it is not the entirety of transformation. The true shift happens when thought, intention, and action come into alignment. When the mind sees clearly, it no longer needs to force a specific outcome. It trusts the process. It moves with the flow of cause and effect rather than against it. This is why effort in the right direction matters more than passive visualization. A mind that is disciplined, focused, and free from illusion does not need to attract good fortune. It naturally moves toward it. A person who cultivates awareness does not need to chase after happiness. It arises as a natural result of clarity. This is the difference between forcing life to conform to desires and aligning with the deeper laws that govern experience. The work is not in controlling thoughts, but in refining them, not in forcing belief, but in understanding perception, not in waiting for reality to shift, but in shifting the mind so that reality is met with wisdom. Thought does not create reality. It creates the framework through which reality is experienced. Purification of thought does not change the world. It changes the way the world is seen. And in that shift, everything transforms. The refinement of thought does not lead to more thought. It leads to its dissolution. The mind that seeks clarity eventually arrives at something unexpected. The realization that true wisdom is not in thinking better, but in needing to think less. The belief that thinking is necessary for every decision, that it must be the driving force behind all understanding, is one of the greatest illusions. Thought refines perception, but only up to a certain point. Beyond that, thinking itself becomes an obstruction. There is a state beyond thought, not of ignorance, not of emptiness in the ordinary sense, but of complete fluidity, where the mind moves effortlessly without analysis, without hesitation, without interference. This is not about suppressing thought, but about transcending its limits. Zen Buddhism calls this mushin, the state of no mind. It is a paradox, full awareness, yet without conceptual thinking, total presence, yet without mental strain. It is not passive emptiness, but a state of effortless wisdom, where the mind no longer clings to ideas, no longer cycles through unnecessary reflection, no longer wastes energy on overthinking. The great misunderstanding is believing that thinking is what leads to truth. But deep insight does not arise through mental strain. It appears when thinking dissolves. The more the mind tries to grasp wisdom, the further it moves away from it. The more it tries to intellectualize understanding, the more fragmented it becomes. A person lost in thought may believe they are moving closer to truth, but they are often only reinforcing their own illusions. Thought is useful until it becomes a cage. The mind that relies only on thinking remains confined to its own limitations, unable to experience reality as it is, only as it can be interpreted. Effortless thought is not the absence of intelligence. It is intelligence that has moved beyond the need for internal dialogue. It is understanding without calculation. When a skilled musician plays, they do not think about every note. When an experienced swordsman moves, they do not strategize each strike. They do not act out of analysis, but from a depth of awareness where action happens without the need for thought. This is not instinct. It's wisdom so deeply ingrained that it flows without interference. The greatest masters, whether in art, philosophy, or combat, do not operate from overthinking. They act from a place where mind and action are one. Prajna, or spontaneous wisdom, arises when thought ceases to be an obstacle. It is insight that does not need to be formed, conclusions that do not require logical assembly, decisions that emerge with precision because they are not clouded by hesitation. When the mind is still, wisdom surfaces naturally. There is no struggle, no back and forth between competing ideas, no inner conflict. Reality is simply seen, and the response arises on its own. The reason most people struggle with decision-making is not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack stillness. Thought collides with thought, contradicts itself, spirals into confusion. The mind hesitates, doubts, second guesses. It tries to plan too much, predict too much, control too much. But the more thought is relied upon, the more entangled it becomes. The mind that trusts in conceptual reasoning alone becomes slow, uncertain, easily disturbed. But the mind that moves with direct knowing is sharp, fluid, and unshakable. Meditation is not just about calming the mind. It is about seeing through the need for constant mental activity. Sitting in stillness, the mind naturally quiets. Thoughts may still arise, but without engagement, they pass. The more this is practiced, the more thought begins to refine itself. Unnecessary reflection fades. The need to narrate every experience disappears. The compulsion to analyze and dissect every moment weakens. What remains is clarity without effort. Most suffering is rooted in excessive thinking, overanalyzing the past, projecting into the future, constructing elaborate mental scenarios. All of these pull the mind away from the present moment, away from the direct experience of life. A person caught in thought is never truly here, never fully present. But the person who sees through thought, who allows it to move without clinging, experiences life with complete attention. This is not an escape from responsibility, but a return to direct experience, unfiltered by the weight of unnecessary mental activity. No mind does not mean dullness. It is the peak of awareness. It is not a lack of intelligence, but intelligence freed from its own limitations. It is not thoughtlessness in the sense of emptiness, but a fullness that doesn't require the constant effort of thinking. When thought is needed, it arises. When it is not, it disappears. There is no attachment to it, no grasping for certainty, no need to construct reality through internal dialogue. The mind conditioned by overthinking is slow, burdened by its own complexity. It hesitates, analyzes endlessly, struggles to find clarity. But the mind that has let go of this habit moves freely. It responds without hesitation, acts without doubt, sees without distortion. It is completely present, completely engaged, completely at ease. This is the way of no mind, not a state of blank emptiness, but of pure clarity, where thought no longer controls perception, where the self is no longer caught in the grip of its own ideas. This is why Zen places emphasis on direct experience over conceptual understanding. Words, philosophies, and intellectual frameworks all serve a purpose, but they are still secondary to the experience itself. A person can read about water for years, but will never understand it until they taste it. A person can study fire, but will never grasp its nature until they feel its heat. Thinking about truth is not the same as knowing it. To know, one must experience. To experience, one must move beyond thought. Meditation reveals this truth directly. As thought slows, perception sharpens. The mind becomes lighter, more open, more in tune with what is. It no longer strains to understand, it simply understands. This is why those who have trained their minds to this level move with effortless precision. They do not hesitate, do not waver, do not need excessive internal dialogue to know what must be done. Their actions are not random, but deeply aligned, emerging from a place of total presence rather than mental noise. Simplicity is the key. The mind that is weighed down by thought is a mind that is complicated, tangled in its own structures. The mind that has seen through thought is simple, direct, free. It does not resist life. It does not fight itself. It moves as it needs to move, rests when it needs to rest, speaks when words are necessary, remains silent when they are not. This is not passive. It is the highest form of engagement because there is no distortion, no hesitation, no excess. Wisdom does not arise from intellectual effort. It arises when the mind is still enough to see clearly. The reason great masters appear calm, unaffected, deeply at peace, is not because they have found all the answers through thought, but because they no longer need to rely on thought to know. They have moved beyond thinking into direct awareness. Their intelligence is not burdened by endless analysis. Their presence is not interrupted by unnecessary mental chatter. They see and they act. No delay, no conflict, no uncertainty. The mind that still seeks wisdom through thinking alone will always be trapped in its own limits. But the mind that sees through thought, that moves beyond attachment to concepts, enters a state where knowing happens without effort. This is the ultimate paradox. True understanding comes when the need for understanding disappears. When thought dies, wisdom is born. When the mind no longer clings, reality reveals itself. This is not the absence of thought, but its highest refinement. The ability to move through life without the burden of mental resistance, to think without thinking, to be fully present without needing to construct experience through the filter of internal dialogue. It is freedom in its purest form. Thought dissolves when the mind no longer clings, but its effects do not vanish so easily. What is left behind, even in the absence of active thinking, is the residue of every past thought, every unconscious habit, every unnoticed impulse. The mind is not an empty space where thoughts come and go without consequence. It is a living ecosystem, constantly shaped by what is allowed to take root and grow. Each thought, no matter how fleeting, plants a seed. Some seeds wither and die without much impact, while others grow into structures that shape perception, behavior, and reality itself. Nothing in the mind exists in isolation. What seems like a random thought is not truly random. It is the result of past conditioning, the continuation of a pattern, the reflection of what has been cultivated over time. A single moment of frustration may seem insignificant, but if reinforced, it strengthens a habit of impatience. A brief, self-critical thought may appear harmless, but if repeated, it deepens into self-doubt. The mind we live with today is the result of the thoughts we have nurtured, consciously or unconsciously. The mental ecosystem is not separate from external reality. The way the mind is conditioned determines how the world is perceived and interacted with. A mind trained in gratitude finds abundance in simple things. A mind conditioned by resentment sees hostility everywhere. A mind lost in fear projects danger onto neutral situations. The external world does not change, but the experience of it does, shaped by the inner patterns that filter every interaction. Most people assume that thoughts are private, that what happens internally stays within the mind. But thought patterns shape energy, presence, and action. A person who continuously feeds thoughts of insecurity does not just suffer internally. Their body language, tone, and decisions reflect it. They move through the world differently, unconsciously signaling their uncertainty, attracting experiences that reinforce their perception. A person whose mind is trained in self-assurance does not need to affirm their confidence out loud. It is embedded in their being, shaping how they respond to life. There is no such thing as an inconsequential thought. The mind does not erase what is entertained, even briefly. Every mental movement leaves an imprint. Some thoughts fade quickly, but others accumulate, merging with similar patterns, growing stronger through repetition. Over time, these patterns become the foundation of perception, dictating what is noticed, what is ignored, what is reacted to, what is dismissed. Mindfulness is the process of tending to this ecosystem with awareness. It is the recognition that every mental seed, if left unchecked, will grow into something. Most people allow thoughts to come and go without questioning their impact. They assume that as long as thoughts are not acted upon, they have no real effect. But thoughts do not need to manifest outwardly to create consequences. They shape internal reality first, influencing emotions, decisions, and energy. A negative thought indulged today may seem harmless, but if repeated, it lays the groundwork for future suffering. A habit of judging others, even if only internally, builds a mindset of constant dissatisfaction. A pattern of assuming the worst in situations creates an expectation of disappointment. The more these mental tendencies are entertained, the more they become automatic, shaping reality before it is even experienced. Thought is not neutral. It feeds cycles. Some cycles lead to suffering, others to clarity. A mind that is constantly distracted builds a habit of disconnection. A mind that returns to awareness builds a habit of presence. What is strengthened in small moments determines the default state of mind in all moments. This is why mindfulness is not just about meditation, but about moment-to-moment awareness of what is being cultivated. A self-sustaining ecosystem of clarity is built not through force, but through repeated awareness. The mind does not need to be controlled. It needs to be observed. The moment a thought is seen clearly, without grasping or rejecting, its hold weakens. It does not mean thought stops arising, but its influence changes. It is no longer an unconscious force shaping experience. It is something witnessed, something that passes without leaving deep imprints. Clarity is not achieved through eliminating thought, but through refining attention. When the mind is clear, thoughts no longer accumulate into tangled patterns of confusion. They appear, but they do not weigh the mind down. They arise, but they do not distort perception. This clarity is not about perfection. It is about fluidity, the ability to let thoughts come and go without grasping, without clinging, without reinforcing unnecessary cycles. Suffering arises when negative mental patterns become so deeply ingrained that they are mistaken for reality. A person who has fed anger for years does not experience it as a passing emotion. They see the world through its lens. A person who has nurtured self-doubt for decades does not recognize it as a thought pattern. It becomes their identity. But these identities are not fixed. They are the result of conditioning, and what has been conditioned can be unconditioned. The process of undoing harmful mental patterns does not require force. It requires consistent awareness, the willingness to notice thoughts without automatically believing them, the discipline to stop feeding cycles that no longer serve. Each time awareness meets a thought without reaction, the thought loses strength. Each time the mind returns to presence rather than being pulled into distraction, clarity grows. Thoughts interact with one another, reinforcing or weakening different tendencies. A moment of patience, repeated often enough, builds resilience. A habit of gratitude, even in small moments, rewires perception toward abundance. A commitment to meeting thoughts with awareness instead of indulgence weakens old patterns of suffering. The mind is constantly shaping itself, adapting to what it is most frequently exposed to. Understanding the mental ecosystem means recognizing that transformation does not happen all at once. No single moment erases all past conditioning, just as no single drop of water nourishes an entire forest. But each moment of awareness, each shift in perception, each small act of clarity contributes to the larger movement of change. The mind that was once tangled in unnecessary thought slowly untangles itself, not through struggle, but through the repeated choice to see clearly. A mind that is well tended does not need to force positivity or suppress negativity. It naturally gravitates toward balance. It does not need constant affirmation or mental discipline to remain stable. It's stable because it has been conditioned that way. Just as an untended garden becomes overrun with weeds, a mind left unobserved becomes dominated by unconscious patterns. But when cultivated with awareness, it flourishes on its own. This is why mindfulness is not a temporary practice, but a lifelong cultivation. The mind, like nature, is always growing something. The only question is whether what is growing leads to clarity or confusion, peace or suffering. The way thought is engaged with today determines the mental landscape of the future. A single moment of awareness may not seem transformative, but over time, these moments accumulate, creating an internal world that is no longer ruled by conditioned patterns, but by presence, clarity, and balance. The mental ecosystem is constantly shaping itself, growing in the direction of attention, habit, and awareness. But within this continuous unfolding, there are moments, rare yet powerful, where a single shift in perception changes everything. Most transformation is gradual, built through small adjustments over time, but there are times when a realization cuts through all conditioning, dissolving illusions in an instant. One thought, seen with absolute clarity, can shatter years of misunderstanding, unraveling patterns of suffering in ways that no amount of effort or repetition could achieve. The weight of a single thought is not in the thought itself, but in the depth of awareness that meets it. The mind is full of thoughts, constantly producing them, yet most pass unnoticed, lost in the stream of habitual perception. But sometimes a single thought lands differently, not as another passing idea, but as a direct experience of truth. This is not an intellectual insight, not a logical conclusion, but something deeper, an awakening that shifts everything without needing further explanation. Satori, the sudden experience of insight in Zen Buddhism, is one of the clearest examples of this. It is not achieved through gradual learning, not built over time through accumulated knowledge, but arrives unexpectedly, like a lightning strike. A person may struggle for years, practicing, meditating, seeking understanding, yet the breakthrough does not come through effort alone. And then, in a single moment, everything changes. Not because something new is learned, but because something false is seen through so clearly that it can no longer hold power. One of the most well-known Zen stories illustrates this. A monk seeking enlightenment goes to a teacher for instruction. The teacher simply tells him to listen to the sound of one hand clapping. The monk tries to understand, thinking deeply, meditating, struggling with the paradox. No answer comes. He persists for days, weeks, months. And then, one day, the mind stops searching, stops struggling, stops trying to grasp the answer with thought. In that moment of release, Satori arises. The answer was never in thinking, it was in the dropping of thought itself. Deep realization is not the result of repeated thinking. It does not come from analyzing concepts, from constructing more ideas, from reinforcing mental effort. In fact, the more one tries to grasp enlightenment through thinking, the further it moves away. The reason is simple. Thinking operates within the framework of concepts, and enlightenment is beyond concepts. It is not something to be understood intellectually, but something that's directly seen, without interpretation, without mental construction. Buddhist history is filled with moments where a single shift in perception transformed everything. The story of the Buddha himself is one of sudden realization. After years of extreme asceticism, pushing the body and mind to their limits in search of truth, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, exhausted but open. In that moment, he saw clearly, suffering arises from attachment, and liberation is not found through struggle, but through seeing the nature of reality as it is. That single realization ended his search. He had spent years seeking, but the moment of awakening arrived not through effort, but through surrender into deep clarity. Many Zen masters have experienced similar moments. One heard the sound of a pebble hitting bamboo and was suddenly freed from all illusion. Another was enlightened when his teacher simply closed a door. These events were not special in themselves, the sound of bamboo, the act of closing a door, but the mind met them with absolute presence, free from conceptual interpretation. The realization was already there, waiting beneath all the accumulated mental noise. It only needed a single shift for everything to become clear. The problem is that most people expect transformation to come through slow, step-by-step progress. They assume that enlightenment is a process, that it must be built gradually through knowledge, effort, and discipline. And while practice does refine the mind, the breakthrough itself doesn't happen in increments. When realization comes, it comes fully, in a single moment, breaking through all layers of illusion at once. It does not require years of preparation. It requires only the right moment of seeing. A single mental shift, if deep enough, can rewire perception permanently. This is why some people who have suffered for years suddenly find peace. Not because their external situation changed, not because they solved all their problems, but because they saw something differently, in a way that made suffering unnecessary. It is not the problems that change, it is the relationship to them. One moment of deep clarity can release attachments that have held the mind in suffering for a lifetime. This is why Buddhist teachings emphasize not just meditation or study, but direct seeing. To read about impermanence, to think about detachment, to understand non-self as a concept, these are not enough. These ideas must be experienced as truth, not as intellectual knowledge, but as something felt deeply, something so undeniable that the mind cannot return to its old way of seeing. The reason one thought can change fate is because perception shapes action, and action shapes reality. A person who believes they are trapped makes choices from that belief. A person who sees that they were never trapped to begin with moves differently, acts differently, responds differently. The external world may remain the same, but the experience of it shifts completely. This is not to say that effort and practice are useless. They create the conditions for realization, just as a tree does not grow without the right soil, water, and sunlight. But just as a tree does not grow through effort, enlightenment doesn't come through force. It comes when conditions align, when the mind has been prepared, when the weight of illusion is light enough to fall away in an instant. This is why Zen emphasizes sudden awakening, not because gradual learning is unimportant, but because true realization is never gradual. It may take years to reach, but when it happens all at once. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. Many people continue to struggle with the idea that a single thought, a single insight, could shift everything. The conditioned mind resists it, believing that deep transformation must be difficult, that wisdom must be earned through suffering, that growth must be slow. But the truth is simpler. A person trapped in darkness does not need to climb out 1 inch at a time. They only need to see the door. Even outside of Buddhism, history is filled with stories of individuals who experienced a single moment that altered their entire path. A scientist who saw a falling apple and realized the nature of gravity. A poet who heard a phrase and found a lifetime of inspiration. A thinker who encountered a simple idea that changed the way they saw the world forever. These shifts do not come through trying harder. They come when the mind is open enough to receive them. The mistake is in believing that one must actively create these insights. They cannot be forced. They cannot be planned. They arise naturally when the mind is quiet enough, still enough, unattached enough to allow truth to reveal itself. This is why meditation, mindfulness, and self-inquiry matter. Not because they directly cause enlightenment, but because they remove the barriers that prevent it. One mental shift is enough, not because thoughts have magical power, but because perception is the foundation of experience. Change perception, and the entire experience of life changes. The world remains, but the way it is seen becomes different. The weight that was once unbearable disappears, not because the situation changed, but because the mind is no longer holding on to it. This is why true wisdom is not found in collecting more knowledge, but in seeing clearly. It is not about adding more layers of understanding, but about removing everything unnecessary until only truth remains. And when that happens, the mind does not need to seek any more. The search ends, not because everything has been solved, but because it is seen that there was never anything missing. A single thought can change everything, but the ability to see thought without attachment is what grants true freedom. It is not the mind's content that binds a person, but their identification with it. Thoughts arise, but they do not force suffering. Clinging to them does. The mind is a continuous stream, but within that movement there is a space that is untouched, a place where thoughts can be observed rather than followed. This is the role of the inner observer, the awareness that sees without interfering, the silent witness that remains still even as the mind moves. Most people believe that controlling thought is the key to peace. They try to suppress negative patterns, force positive thinking, and regulate their inner dialogue. But this approach only strengthens the struggle. The more a person tries to push thought away, the more power it gains. The mind does not quiet through effort. It quiets through understanding. When thought is observed without resistance, it begins to lose its hold naturally. Vipassana, the practice of insight meditation, is rooted in this understanding. It is not about stopping thought, not about silencing the mind by force, but about seeing things as they are. The practice is simple. Watch. Thought arises, watch it. Emotion appears, observe it. Sensations shift. Notice them. There is no judgment, no reaction, no attempt to fix or alter anything. The moment the mind stops interfering, a radical shift occurs. Thought moves, but it is no longer heavy. Emotion arises, but it no longer pulls the mind into identification. The struggle dissolves, not because thought has disappeared, but because it is no longer mistaken for the self. Most suffering is not caused by thought itself, but by the belief that every thought must be engaged with. The moment thought is taken too seriously, it dictates emotion, shapes perception, controls action. But thought is nothing more than passing movement, an event in the mind like wind moving through trees. It does not need to be grasped. It does not need to be feared. When seen with detachment, it comes and goes without leaving deep imprints. Non-resistance is the foundation of effortless transformation. The mind that fights itself remains in conflict. The mind that allows itself to be seen without interference begins to unravel its own distortions. This does not mean being passive or indifferent. It means recognizing that thought does not need to be manipulated in order to change. The moment a thought is met with full awareness, its nature is revealed. The clarity itself is enough to loosen its grip. Vipassana works because it is not based on force. It does not attempt to construct new belief systems or impose artificial calmness. It simply brings attention to what is already happening, removing illusion through direct seeing. In doing so, it dismantles identification with thought, weakening the habits that keep suffering in place. Most people do not realize that they are not thinking, they are being thought. The mind moves automatically, conditioned by past impressions, driven by unseen impulses. A reaction arises before awareness even has a chance to intervene. But the moment the observer steps in, everything changes. Thought is no longer the master. It is simply something that appears, something that can be watched without being followed. Detachment does not mean suppression. It does not mean ignoring or rejecting thoughts. It means seeing them with enough clarity that they no longer deceive. A thought arises, saying, "I am not enough." The untrained mind believes it, reacts to it, reinforces it. But the aware mind sees it as just another passing event, no different from a cloud moving across the sky. The thought has no inherent power. It only has as much influence as is given to it. When this is deeply understood, the need to fight against thought disappears. Thought no longer creates suffering, not because it has been eliminated, but because it is no longer believed in. It is no longer mistaken for truth. The mind may continue to generate stories, fears, judgments, but none of them stick. They come, they go, they dissolve before they have a chance to solidify into identity. This is why the greatest transformation happens not through control, but through awareness. The person who tries to eliminate negativity by force becomes trapped in an endless cycle of resistance. The person who simply observes with full attention discovers that negativity has no real substance. It is only an echo of past conditioning, a habit that fades when it is no longer reinforced. Vipassana reveals this directly. Sitting in stillness, awareness sharpens. The movement of thought becomes clear. The subtle shifts in emotion become visible. The automatic tendencies of the mind are exposed. But rather than reacting to any of it, the practice is simply to watch. The act of watching itself is the undoing of illusion. Non-resistance does not mean inaction. It means moving in harmony with reality rather than against it. A person who fights thought strengthens it. A person who watches thought without grasping weakens its influence. The process is not about eliminating the mind's movement, but about changing the relationship to it. The moment the observer becomes fully present, a shift occurs. thought slows, not because it is being controlled, but because its momentum is no longer being fed. The mind, left to its own nature, settles. The noise that once seemed overwhelming becomes background movement, no longer something to struggle with. Effortless transformation is not the result of doing more, but of seeing more clearly. The habit of suffering is maintained through unconscious reaction. The habit of freedom is developed through conscious witnessing. What was once a constant internal battle becomes a quiet unfolding, a natural movement toward clarity. The greatest illusion is that thought must be controlled in order to be free from it. The truth is the opposite. Freedom comes when thought is left alone, when it is neither indulged nor suppressed, when it is allowed to arise and pass without interference. The act of watching with pure awareness is the highest form of discipline, not because it imposes restriction, but because it dissolves the need for it. A person who remains as the observer is unshakable. The mind may produce fear, but it is seen as just a thought. The mind may generate doubt, but it is recognized as nothing more than a passing impression. The entire structure of suffering begins to collapse because it is no longer being held together by unconscious belief. This is why the practice of observation is the most direct path to liberation. It does not require new concepts, new philosophies, new mental strategies. It only requires presence. When thought is seen as it is, without distortion, its power fades. When the mind stops clinging, reality reveals itself effortlessly. The observer is not something separate from the self. It is the self before it became entangled in thought. It is the awareness that has always been present, hidden beneath layers of identification. The process of waking up is not about becoming something new. It is about returning to what has always been there. Vipassana is not just a meditation technique. It is a way of being. It is the ability to move through life with clarity, to meet every moment with full awareness, to see thought without becoming trapped in it. It is the shift from being lost in the mind to being the witness of it. Non-resistance is the foundation. The mind does not need to be forced into silence. It only needs to be seen. Awareness itself is enough. In the space of pure observation, thought untangles. Illusions dissolve. Suffering loses its grip. And what remains is something beyond thought, beyond struggle, beyond effort. A state of clarity so natural that it needs no explanation, no validation, no striving. It simply is. Thoughts are not confined to the mind. They spill into the body, shaping movement, breath, posture, and even the state of health. The belief that thoughts are separate from physical existence is an illusion. The body and mind are woven together so intricately that they cannot be divided. The way a person thinks is reflected in the way they carry themselves, in the tension they hold, in the way they breathe. Every mental pattern leaves a mark, influencing not only emotions, but the entire physiological structure. Buddhism speaks of nama-rupa, the interplay between mind and body, emphasizing that neither exists independently. The mind directs the body, and the body influences the mind. Thoughts trigger chemical reactions, shaping hormones, heart rate, and immune function. The body, in turn, sends signals that reinforce certain mental states. A person caught in a cycle of stress carries that stress in their muscles, breath, and nervous system. A person who cultivates inner calm feels it reflected in their physical being, their ease of movement, their ability to rest without disturbance. Posture is one of the clearest expressions of thought. A mind that is anxious, defensive, or weighed down by fear produces a body that is tight, slouched, and constricted. Shoulders rise in tension, breath becomes shallow, muscles tighten without awareness. This is not a random occurrence, it is the physical imprint of thought patterns. The body does not just reflect emotion, it absorbs it, shaping itself according to the mind's internal landscape. The way breath moves through the body is another direct link to thought. A person locked in a state of worry breathes differently than someone at ease. Shallow, rapid breaths signal an overactive mind, reinforcing the loop of anxiety. Deep, slow breaths signal relaxation, allowing the mind to settle. The body is not merely responding to thoughts, it is shaping them in return. A habit of unconscious breathing reinforces mental restlessness, just as mindful breathing reinforces clarity and presence. Long-term thinking habits create patterns that are not just mental, but biological. A person who constantly anticipates problems conditions the body for stress. The nervous system remains on alert, muscles remain engaged, digestion is disrupted, sleep becomes restless. This is not a temporary state, it becomes the body's new normal. Chronic stress is not only a mental burden, it is a physical condition that manifests in tension, illness, and exhaustion. Negative thought patterns weaken the body over time. When the mind feeds on anger, resentment, or despair, the body bears the weight of those emotions. The immune system is suppressed, inflammation rises, organs work under strain. This is not an abstract concept. It is a measurable reality. The mind-body connection is so strong that medical studies have repeatedly shown how stress contributes to disease, how emotions shape immune response, how mental states influence recovery and healing. But just as harmful thoughts shape the body negatively, conscious awareness can rewire it toward balance. Mindfulness is not only a tool for mental clarity, it is a way to reset the body's responses, to free it from the unconscious conditioning of past thought patterns. A person who becomes aware of their breath, their posture, their sensations, begins to interrupt old cycles. Tension that once remained unnoticed is released. Movements that were once rigid become fluid. The body learns to exist in a state of ease rather than constant preparation for stress. Healing through mindfulness is not about forcing the body to change. It is about removing the patterns that keep it locked in unnecessary suffering. The body does not need to be controlled. It needs to be listened to. Most people live disconnected from their own physical presence, unaware of how much unnecessary strain they carry. By bringing attention to these unnoticed states, change begins effortlessly. One of the deepest realizations in Buddhist practice is that suffering is not only in the mind, it is stored in the body. Years of accumulated stress, fear, and unresolved emotions do not just disappear. They remain embedded in muscle memory and posture, in the way energy moves. This is why meditation is not just about stilling thought, but about fully experiencing the body from within, noticing the patterns that have been ignored, releasing the layers of tension that were never questioned. A person who has lived in a state of emotional suppression often finds that when they sit in stillness, the body begins to speak. Tightness in the chest, constriction in the throat, an aching tension in the back. These sensations are not random. They are the physical manifestations of unprocessed emotions, of thoughts that were never fully seen, of stress that was never allowed to pass through. The body remembers everything the mind tries to forget. Mindfulness practice reveals these imprints, not by analyzing them, but by allowing them to surface without resistance. The moment something is fully felt, it begins to dissolve. A deep breath, a moment of complete awareness, a release of tension, all of these can undo years of conditioned strain. This is why mindfulness is so effective in reducing stress-related illnesses, in alleviating chronic pain, in restoring balance to the nervous system. It does not force healing. It creates the space for healing to unfold naturally. The power of thought in shaping physical reality is most evident in the way people age. A person who carries a lifetime of unresolved stress shows it in their body. Wrinkles formed not just by time, but by habitual expressions of worry. Stiffness created not by age alone, but by years of unconscious tension. Meanwhile, a person who has cultivated ease and presence radiates a different energy. Their movements remain fluid, their breath remains deep, their presence feels lighter. The difference is not in genetics alone, but in how the mind has conditioned the body over decades. There are monks who have lived into extreme old age with strength and vitality, not because they had special physical training, but because their minds were free. A person who does not carry stress unnecessarily, who does not hold on to resentment, who does not let fear settle in the body, remains light, even as years pass. The aging process does not accelerate because of time alone, but because of the accumulated weight of unresolved thought. This is why awareness is the most powerful tool for reshaping physical reality. When a person notices how their thoughts are affecting their body, they can interrupt the process before it turns into chronic pain, before it hardens into habitual tension, before it manifests as illness. A person who checks in with their breath throughout the day, who loosens the shoulders when they feel stress creeping in, who moves with conscious presence instead of automatic tension, is actively reshaping their own physical state. Healing through thought is not about suppressing pain or ignoring discomfort. It is about seeing the direct link between mental patterns and physical sensations, about breaking the cycle before it deepens. It is about bringing awareness to the moments when stress begins to build, rather than waiting until it has become unbearable. It is about unlearning the unconscious habit of carrying unnecessary strain, about letting the body return to its natural state of balance. The mind does not exist in isolation, and neither does suffering. Most people attempt to solve problems mentally while ignoring the body, or attempt to treat physical symptoms while ignoring the mind. But no real healing can occur without addressing both together. A person who constantly holds their breath cannot truly find peace, no matter how many positive thoughts they try to adopt. A person who carries emotional weight in their posture cannot fully move forward, no matter how much they try to change their mindset. Thought and body are one, and they must be understood as one. When mindfulness becomes a daily practice, the body begins to change. Stress that once lingered for hours dissolves in minutes. Fatigue that once felt overwhelming lifts more easily. Sleep improves, digestion stabilizes, energy flows without obstruction. These changes do not happen through willpower, but through the natural process of removing what no longer needs to be held. This is why meditation is not just about the mind. It is about resetting the entire system. When attention turns inward, when breath becomes conscious, when sensations are felt without resistance, the body begins to unwind itself. Healing is not something that needs to be forced. It is something that happens when the mind stops interfering, when awareness replaces unconscious tension, when presence becomes the default state instead of worry. Thoughts do not just shape perception, they shape the physical experience of life itself. The way the body moves, the way energy flows, the way health unfolds is a direct reflection of the mind's conditioning. A person who understands this does not wait for illness to remind them to take care of their mind. They see every moment as an opportunity to bring awareness to their breath, to relax unnecessary tension, to move with ease rather than strain. The greatest realization is that the body is not separate from thought. It is thought in form. Every movement, every sensation, every breath is an extension of mental patterns. To change one is to change the other. And when this is deeply understood, life is no longer lived as a struggle between mind and body, but as a seamless flow, where awareness guides both toward harmony, balance, and effortless well-being. The mind moves in patterns, weaving thoughts together so seamlessly that it seems impossible to step outside them. Each thought pulls the next, like links in a chain, reinforcing emotions, shaping perception, and dictating action. Without awareness, these patterns continue endlessly, trapping the mind in cycles of stress, regret, and anticipation. But what if these patterns did not need to run their course? What if a single moment of awareness was enough to let a thought dissolve before it created unnecessary suffering? The ability to interrupt thought before it solidifies into reaction is one of the most powerful skills in Buddhist practice. The mind is constantly generating narratives, filling in gaps, creating stories where none exist. A single thought of doubt, if left unchecked, grows into hesitation. A moment of frustration, if indulged, turns into anger. A feeling of sadness, if reinforced, deepens into despair. But none of these emotions exist independently. They are all fed by thought. If the chain of thought is broken before it gathers momentum, suffering is prevented before it even begins. This is where the art of thought pauses becomes essential. Most people assume that thoughts must be completed, that every mental process must reach a conclusion. But this is an illusion. Thought does not need to be followed to its end. It can be left incomplete, allowed to dissolve midstream, before it takes hold of emotion, before it shapes reality. The ability to insert gaps between thoughts is not suppression. It is the highest form of mental discipline, a skillful way of preventing suffering without force, without resistance. Shikantaza, the Zen practice of just sitting, is one of the purest expressions of this principle. It is not meditation in the conventional sense. It is not about focusing on the breath, repeating a mantra, or trying to achieve a particular state. It is simply sitting, doing nothing, allowing thought to arise and pass without interference. In this stillness, a fundamental truth is revealed. Thoughts do not need to be completed. They can arise, but if they are not engaged with, they disappear on their own, leaving no trace. This is the secret to natural mind purification. Most people assume that clarity comes from analyzing thought, from working through every mental issue until resolution is found. But true clarity comes not from thinking more, but from thinking less. Not by suppressing thought, but by allowing it to pass without attachment. The moment thought is left alone, it dissolves. The mind begins to clear, not because effort is applied, but because there's no longer anything holding on to unnecessary patterns. The challenge is that the mind is addicted to completion. When a thought appears, the instinct is to follow it, to see where it leads, to resolve it like a puzzle that must be solved. This is why people replay conversations in their heads, why they imagine worst-case scenarios, why they dwell on the past and worry about the future. The mind does not like leaving things unfinished, but this very tendency is what traps it in endless loops of suffering. Breaking this cycle requires learning to let thought remain incomplete. When a worry arises, it does not need to be followed. When anger begins to form, it does not need to be justified. When the mind starts generating narratives, they do not need to be believed. Thought is only as powerful as the attention given to it. The moment attention is withdrawn, thought loses momentum, fading like a wave that never reaches the shore. This practice does not mean suppressing thoughts. It means seeing them with such clarity that their true nature is revealed. A thought is just a thought, nothing more. It is not reality. It is not truth. It is only mental movement, something that appears and disappears. When this is understood deeply, the mind stops clinging. There is no need to finish every thought, no need to let it run its full course. Most suffering is not caused by external events, but by the mind's inability to let go of unnecessary thoughts. A moment of irritation turns into hours of resentment because the mind keeps replaying the situation. A minor setback turns into self-doubt because thought keeps reinforcing failure. A single fear expands into overwhelming anxiety because it is fed by constant mental repetition. None of this is inevitable. If the thought is left alone before it takes root, the entire cycle ends before it begins. This is the power of inserting mindful gaps between thoughts. A moment of awareness is enough to interrupt an entire pattern, noticing the breath, feeling the body, shifting attention away from mental noise. These small acts create space where thought would otherwise dominate. And in this space, suffering does not have a chance to take hold. It is important to understand that this process is not about forcefully stopping thought. That only creates more resistance. Instead, it is about noticing thought as it arises and choosing not to follow it. The mind may try to pull attention back, but each time awareness returns to the present moment, the cycle weakens. Thought loses its grip. The momentum of mental chatter slows. A stillness begins to emerge, not because thought has been eliminated, but because it is no longer given unnecessary attention. This is why meditation is not about controlling the mind, but about training it to let go. The more frequently thought is allowed to dissolve midstream, the easier it becomes. What once seemed impossible, letting go of worry, stopping the cycle of overthinking, preventing unnecessary emotional suffering, becomes natural. The mind begins to function differently, no longer rushing to complete every thought, no longer mistaking mental noise for reality. One of the greatest realizations in Buddhist practice is that most of what the mind produces is unnecessary. The vast majority of thoughts serve no real purpose. They do not provide insight. They do not solve problems. They do not lead to peace. They only reinforce patterns, strengthening habits that keep suffering in place. When this is seen clearly, the need to engage with every thought disappears. Thought loses its authority. The mind becomes lighter, less burdened, free to exist without being constantly trapped in its own processes. The ability to let thought go midstream is not just a meditative skill. It is a way of moving through life with clarity. A person who has trained their mind in this way does not get caught in unnecessary mental spirals. They do not waste energy replaying conversations, obsessing over things beyond their control, or creating problems that do not exist. Their thoughts arise, but they do not become entangled in them. They experience emotions, but they do not amplify them with unnecessary thinking. Letting go of thought midstream does not mean losing intelligence or awareness. In fact, it creates the opposite effect. When the mind is no longer cluttered with unnecessary thoughts, it sees more clearly. Decisions become easier, creativity flows naturally, understanding deepens. The constant mental noise that once consumed energy is no longer present, leaving behind a mind that is sharp, focused, and fully present. This is why the highest form of wisdom is not in thinking more, but in thinking less. Not because thought is bad, but because most thought is unhelpful. The ability to let go of unnecessary mental activity creates space for true insight, for spontaneous understanding, for clarity that is not clouded by habitual thinking. The person who masters this practice is no longer controlled by thought. They do not need to suppress it, nor do they need to follow it. They simply let it arise and pass, like waves on an ocean, without grasping, without resisting. In this state, the mind functions effortlessly. Thought no longer dictates reality. It is just something that comes and goes, leaving no residue, no burden, no unnecessary suffering. This is the path to mental freedom, not by controlling thought, but by seeing through it, not by suppressing the mind, but by allowing it to move without attachment. When thought is no longer something to be fought against, when it is no longer mistaken for self, when it is allowed to die midstream without resistance, then what remains is something beyond thought, a state of clarity, ease, and natural awareness, untouched by the constant movement of the mind. Thoughts come and go like ripples on the surface of a vast ocean, but the real depth lies beneath. People spend their lives caught in the movement of these ripples, mistaking them for reality, chasing one thought after another, convinced that the next idea, the next realization, the next mental effort will finally bring peace. But true transformation does not come from thinking, it comes from seeing. No thought, no matter how profound, can match the power of direct awareness. Thought is always one step removed from reality, a mental shadow of what is. Awareness, on the other hand, does not interpret life. It experiences it directly, without distortion, without the limitations of conceptual thinking. This is the highest realization in Buddhism. Thoughts are not reality. They are reflections. People believe they must think their way to clarity, plan their way to peace, analyze their way to happiness. But thought alone cannot produce freedom, because thought itself is part of the illusion. The more one tries to change through thinking, the deeper they get trapped in the very patterns they seek to escape. The mind creates a problem, then tries to think its way out, reinforcing the illusion that something needs to be solved, that something is missing, that something must be figured out. But nothing is missing. The only thing that prevents peace is the belief that thought holds the key to it. Awareness transforms life faster than thought ever could. It does not need to force change. It dissolves illusion instantly. A person lost in thought believes their suffering is real, that their problems have weight, that their identity is shaped by the endless stream of mental activity. But the moment they step back, the moment they simply observe rather than engage, the entire structure begins to collapse. Thought has no substance when it is seen for what it is. Its power is only in its ability to distract. The second it is met with pure awareness, it loses its grip. This is why the shift from thinking about change to being change itself is so powerful. Most people assume they must plan their transformation, that they must strategize their way to wisdom, that they must construct a better version of themselves through mental effort. But real change is not a process. It is a moment of direct seeing. The person who struggles with overthinking does not need more strategies to stop thinking. They need to see that thought itself is not the answer. The person searching for self-improvement does not need to build a better version of themselves. They need to see that the search itself is keeping them trapped. Nothing needs to be added for freedom to arise. Only the weight of illusion needs to be removed. The ocean does not need to chase its own waves in order to be still. It simply needs to stop mistaking them for its essence. The mind does not need to eliminate thought to find peace. It only needs to stop believing that thought is its master. Awareness does not fight thought, does not control it, does not try to shape it. It simply sees it, and in that seeing, the entire illusion loses power. Most people try to improve their lives by manipulating the content of their thoughts. They attempt to replace negative thinking with positive thinking, to suppress what they do not like, to strengthen what they do. But all of this is still operating at the level of thought. It is like trying to rearrange waves instead of realizing the ocean is already at peace beneath them. The only real shift that matters is moving from identification with thought to the pure awareness that watches it. This is why the greatest masters are not those who have perfected their thinking, but those who have gone beyond it. They do not seek wisdom through complex ideas, but through direct presence. They do not try to solve their suffering at the level of mind, but see through the illusion of suffering itself. They do not rely on thought to lead them out of confusion, because they recognize that confusion itself is the result of relying on thought. They remain in a state of pure seeing, untouched by the fluctuations of the mind. Thoughts are not the enemy, but they are not the solution either. They will always arise, but they do not need to be followed, engaged, or resisted. When awareness deepens, thought becomes background noise rather than a dominant force. It moves like wind through trees, present but unimportant. The person who no longer identifies with thought is free from its control. They can use thought when necessary, but they do not mistake it for truth. They think, but they are not trapped by thinking. They feel, but they are not enslaved by emotion. They act, but their actions are not dictated by unconscious mental patterns. Most people live as if their thoughts define them. They say, "I am anxious," "I am not good enough," "I am stuck." But these statements are not reality. They are mental labels, interpretations, fleeting patterns of thought. When awareness steps in, these labels no longer hold. There is no such thing as "I am anxious." There is only anxiety appearing and disappearing. There is no "I am not good enough." There is only a thought passing through awareness, no different from a cloud moving through the sky. The mind creates identities, but awareness reveals their emptiness. This is why enlightenment is not something to be achieved through effort. It is something that is already here, hidden beneath identification with thought. The only thing that needs to be done is to stop clinging to mental stories. The more a person tries to figure it out, the deeper they get caught in illusion. The moment they stop searching, stop chasing, stop struggling to mentally construct their freedom, the truth becomes clear. It was always here. This is the paradox of liberation. The person who tries to force clarity through thought remains in confusion. The person who simply allows awareness to replace thought sees reality as it is. The more one tries to become something, the further they move from what they already are. Freedom is not found in constructing a new self. It is found in seeing that the old self was never real. People are conditioned to believe that transformation is a process, that peace must be earned, that wisdom is built step by step. But all of this is still within the realm of thought. The reality is that awakening is immediate. The person who stops searching finds what they were looking for. The person who stops trying to fix themselves realizes there was never anything broken. The person who stops believing in their mental struggles sees that they were never trapped to begin with. The highest truth in Buddhism is that there is nothing to attain, only something to let go of. Thought has been mistaken for reality, and this single misunderstanding creates all suffering. The mind weaves stories, and those stories are believed. but none of them are real. The only thing real is the awareness that sees them. That awareness is always present, always untouched, always free. The only reason people do not experience it is because they're too busy chasing thoughts. The shift from thinking to awareness is the only shift that matters. The moment attention moves away from thought and into direct experience, life transforms. This is not a slow process. It is instant. The mind does not need to be gradually improved. It simply needs to stop being the master. The second this is seen clearly, all struggle ends. There is nothing left to fix, nothing left to achieve, nothing left to resolve. Thought continues to move, but it no longer creates suffering. It no longer defines identity. It no longer dictates experience. What remains is something beyond thought, pure awareness, effortless presence, a state of being that needs no explanation, no validation, no effort. It is not something to be gained. It is something that has never been lost. The only thing that has ever needed to change is the realization that thought is not the source of freedom. Awareness is. And once this is seen, once thought is no longer given the power to control perception, the search for peace ends. Because peace is not something to be found. It is what remains when thought is no longer mistaken for truth. There is a state beyond thought, a space so still that the mind ceases to be the dominant force in experience. It is not emptiness in the way most people understand it. It is not a void, not a loss, not a passive silence. It is presence in its purest form, an awareness untouched by mental chatter, free from the grasp of concepts, unburdened by the need to interpret, categorize, or control. This is the state from which the greatest sages have operated, the state in which wisdom arises without effort, in which action flows without hesitation, in which life is lived without resistance. People assume that power comes from the mind's ability to think, analyze, and plan. They believe that the most intelligent, the most accomplished, the most effective individuals are those who can think faster, process more information, and mentally strategize their way through life. But true power does not come from thought. It comes from the ability to act with absolute clarity, without interference from the mind's noise, without hesitation, without the confusion that overthinking creates. The greatest sages, the most enlightened beings, do not operate from thought. They operate from pure awareness. Stillness is not inaction. It is the ability to move without wasted effort, to respond without distortion, to act without being driven by unconscious patterns. A person trapped in thought hesitates, second-guesses, over-analyzes. They are always one step removed from reality, lost in the space between experience and mental processing. But the person who has transcended thought acts directly. There is no separation between knowing and doing, between perceiving and responding. The mind no longer obstructs. It becomes an open channel, allowing life to move through it without resistance. Overactive mental effort weakens effectiveness rather than strengthening it. The person who constantly thinks through every possibility becomes exhausted, weighed down by their own mind. They mistake complexity for intelligence, but true intelligence is found in simplicity. A mind that has let go of unnecessary thought sees with precision. It does not need to process endlessly, it simply knows. The moment excessive thinking is abandoned, intuition sharpens, decisions become effortless, and action becomes immediate. This is why the greatest sages live without struggle. They do not need to force themselves to be disciplined, to constantly motivate themselves, to fight against their own habits. They move with the natural rhythm of existence, aligned with what is, rather than trapped in mental projections of what should be. They do not waste energy resisting reality because they are not lost in thought-based illusions. Their stillness is not passivity. It is the highest form of mastery. The mind believes that more thought leads to better outcomes, but it is the opposite. The more thought dominates, the more reality becomes distorted. A person who thinks too much loses the ability to see clearly. They add unnecessary complexity where simplicity would have been enough. They create problems where none exist. They hesitate when action is needed. They dwell on the past and anticipate the future, never fully experiencing the present. Stillness creates greater impact than mental effort because it allows action to come from a place of absolute clarity. There is no doubt, no contradiction, no hesitation, only direct movement, direct perception, direct response. The greatest athletes, artists, and masters of any discipline do not operate from constant analysis. They are fully present, fully immersed, completely in the flow of what they are doing. They do not think about action. They are action itself. The final transcendence of thought is not about eliminating the mind, nor is it about rejecting thinking altogether. It is about seeing that thought is only one layer of experience, and that there is something deeper, something more fundamental than thought itself. Meditation is not about controlling the mind. It is about going beyond it. Deep meditation reveals that thoughts are only surface-level activity, that the mind is not the center of experience, that awareness exists independent of thinking. The person who transcends thought does not become empty. They become full, full of presence, full of clarity, full of life itself. They do not operate from ideas alone, but from direct knowing. They do not analyze their way through decisions. They respond naturally. They do not attempt to control the mind. They let it settle on its own, revealing the stillness that has always been present beneath its movement. In the deepest states of meditation, thought ceases entirely, not because it is forced into silence, but because awareness no longer feeds it. The mind, left undisturbed, returns to its natural state, a vast open space, untouched by noise, free from compulsion, resting in pure being. This is not sleep, not unconsciousness, but the highest level of wakefulness. In this state, there is nothing to be solved, nothing to be pursued, nothing to be resisted. Thought is seen for what it is, a temporary flickering, a momentary ripple on the surface of an infinite stillness. True wisdom arises from this place, not from intellectual effort, not from accumulating knowledge, but from resting in direct awareness. The person who sees this understands that no amount of thought can grasp reality. Reality is not something to be figured out. It is something to be lived. The more one tries to mentally capture life, the further they move from it. The moment they let go of thought as the ultimate authority, life reveals itself effortlessly. This is why the most powerful mind is not the one that thinks the most, but the one that has gone beyond the need for constant thinking, the need to analyze, to explain, to justify, to control. All of it falls away. What remains is presence. And in that presence there is nothing lacking. There is no need to chase, no need to struggle, no need to seek. Everything is already here. The mind, unburdened by unnecessary thought, becomes a vessel for something far greater than itself. The sages of the past did not attain their wisdom through excessive thinking. They attained it by stepping beyond thought, by entering the space where direct knowing replaces mental effort. The greatest realizations do not come from mental effort. They come in the gaps between thought, in the silent moments where reality is seen without distortion. The person who realizes this no longer seeks to control life. They allow life to flow through them. They no longer fight against their own mind. They rest in the awareness that transcends it. They no longer believe that more thought leads to better understanding. They see that real understanding comes when thought is no longer necessary. This is not something to be achieved through force. It is something that happens when thought is no longer mistaken for the center of existence. The moment a person sees that awareness exists before thought, beyond thought, independent of thought, the illusion collapses. They do not need to try to be still. Stillness is already there. They do not need to force clarity. Clarity arises naturally when interference stops. They do not need to fight against their thoughts. They simply stop believing that thought is where power lies. The most powerful mind is the one that is free from the need to constantly think. It is not that thought disappears completely, but that it loses its dominance. It no longer dictates reality. It no longer controls perception. It's no longer mistaken for truth. Thought arises, but it's no longer clung to. The mind remains open, clear, unobstructed. In this state, everything becomes effortless, not because life has changed, but because perception has shifted. This is the end of mental struggle, the final transcendence of thought itself, not by force, not by suppression, not by effort, but by the simple recognition that thought was never the source of power to begin with. Power has always belonged to awareness, and awareness needs no thought to be what it is. The mind has always been more than just a container for thoughts. It is the architect of experience, the silent force shaping perception, the unseen power directing life itself. But the greatest secret is this: you are not your thoughts. They come and go, rise and fall, flicker like shadows against a vast and boundless awareness. The moment you stop clinging to them, the moment you stop mistaking them for truth, you step into something far greater, an existence untouched by mental struggle, a mind free from the weight of unnecessary noise, a life no longer dictated by illusions. Every thought you entertain plants a seed. Some grow into suffering, some into wisdom, some into peace. The power has never been in the thought itself, but in the awareness that chooses whether to engage or let go. When you recognize this, thinking becomes a tool, not a master. You move from unconscious reaction to conscious creation. You step beyond limitation, beyond distraction, beyond the endless pull of mental narratives. Buddhist sages have shown that real transformation does not come from trying to force better thoughts, nor from chasing the mind endlessly in circles of over-analysis. It comes from stepping back, seeing thought for what it is, and resting in the awareness beneath it. In this space, clarity is natural, action is effortless, and peace is no longer something to seek. It becomes the ground upon which all experience unfolds. You now hold the key. The mind can be an endless maze or an open sky. It depends on where you place your attention. Will you continue to believe every thought that arises, or will you step back, see through the illusion, and reclaim the power that has always been yours? Now, I want to hear from you. What insight struck you the most? Which idea challenged the way you see your own mind? Leave a comment below, and let's continue this conversation. Your thoughts matter, but even more powerful than thought is your awareness of them. And if you found value in this, subscribe to the channel. There is so much more ahead, more wisdom, more clarity, more ways to step beyond illusion and into true freedom. Don't just learn, live it. I'll see you in the next one.